Hey yo 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 yo, it's your boy DJ Fermi back once again with the ill behavior. I am still grinding AV because this is what my life is now. I sit here next to this guy who's also AFK, and we both move every 4.5 minutes. Actually, I think we'll move forward a little bit. How new is this match? 35 minutes. Now, I joined late, so I missed all the good honor awards. So I truly have no... Well, I think I got some of them. I got some elites. What is my total honor this week? I'm at 109,000. That puts me at rank what? $175. That's what I was last week, I think. So we'll try to keep that rank. 172 is last week's rank. Yeah, standing. Wait up. So it's the current rank, standing. I'm gonna look up the honor screen. We're running. Your distracts won't work on me, rogues. I fucking know what's up. I know how things are done. Nice try, though. Nice fucking try. Do they want more on defense? These idiots. Oh, looks like we got the bunker. Now we have a large mass of horde that should be charging forward. Where do you think you're going? Got him. Oh, look at this guy's armor set. What is that? Yeah, he's got the champion set. That's what I'm gonna have. I see you. Have some Shadow Word Death. That's the ability that came out in the Burning Crusade. Oh, he got me. He got me. That was not the same guy who distracted me before. Fucking slippery mofos. Now this time I might have some buffs. Expect a rogue to stab me any second. Oh, you want to play? Your magic has no effect on me. Oh, crap. Got him. There's a lot of people wondering what the hell's going on over here. Well,
from all walks of life, talking about what games mean to them. And today it's my honor to introduce one of our industry's most renowned designers with an individual who is charting the future of the world in so many incredible ways, who also happens to be a big gamer. So without further ado, please welcome Todd Howard and Elon Musk.
what? What? Elon Musk and Todd Howard? What?
Welcome to E3.
Thank you.
Great to have you
Hey, good to
guys
see you
here.
guys.
So I think when we announced this, the biggest question everyone had was, do these guys know each other? Why are they together? You
What's
guys
going on?
are friends, right?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, we're friends. Totally not
How did you
paid.
get to know each other?
People tried to connect us over several years. Like, do you know Elon? You should know Elon. And we finally connected. I think it was when I bought my Tesla.
Yeah.
Somebody. I went into the store and actually you don't buy Tesla. You order them online when you go there. And you know, on your PC, when you select Ultra for all the settings,
Yeah.
I click that button when ordering a Tesla, and then we connected.
Yeah, I've actually been a big fan of your games for a long time. You played Fallout 3 all the way, like, I really played that game a lot. I think I explored every corner of that game. Played obviously Skyrim. I did not complete Skyrim. That was intense. Like, it's a big game. Played Fallout 4. That was great. So, and then when I was having like a birthday, I asked for that statue of that weird-looking guy in Fallout. You know, with the 1950s guy with the. You know that guy. Anyway.
That one?
So yeah.
They got durability loss for that.
Statue
Okay.
of this 1950s dude in like I guess a Volt jumpsuit.
It's the Vault Boy.
Volt Boy,
Yeah.
exactly. Volt Boy.
And you have this at home?
It was so weird having that at a party because like, most basically there were like two nerds that knew what they referred to and were like and everyone else was like, man, that's weird.
Now, rolling back in time, when you were a kid, you programmed the game. Is that true? Like in the early 80s?
Yeah, I mean, primitive. I was just a kid, yeah.
You're like 12, I think, right?
Yeah, I remember. I think it was probably like 10 or 11.
I mean,
Like,
I programmed a game on my graphing calculator when I was like
Yeah,
12.
it's a simple game. It was like you sort of fight. You're a space fighter and you fight an alien space freighter. Yeah, I wrote the game, did the graphics and the sound and everything. Just didn't have anything else. So it was a very simple game. I want to emphasize.
Did you, when you were younger, did you ever aspire to like make games or get into making games?
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I thought about doing. Otherwise, sure.
Wow.
It seemed like that would be super fun.
That's what I mean. Then you went into rocket science or a few places where you kept doing a little bit of game stuff, right?
Yeah, actually, I worked at a gaming startup, which weirdly was called Rocket Science.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Ah! Did you guys know that? Hold on, I gotta tweet at somebody. Where's my Twitter? All right. Oh, I forgot I was streaming. It doesn't matter. No one's watching. I sent out my tweet at some famous people. Let's see if they hit me up.
Fate loves irony.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked rocket science programming games. It was a long time ago, and it must have been like '93 or something, maybe '94. Yeah, that was tricky.
Never applied to Bethesda though.
I didn't. But I was
He was doing other things.
Exactly.
well, I was gonna. My original plan was to go to grad school at Stanford and do just study ultracapacitors for use in electric vehicles.
That's what I want to do.
Do electric cars. And
I want to study ultracapacitors. What the fuck, Elon? You and me got to get on this.
Rockets would be cool. I mean, I can sort of talk a little bit about basically it's like what are the things I think that are like quite important for the future to be good, and obviously in order for the future to be good, we have to have sustainable energy. So we have to have sustainable production and consumption of energy. That means making solar panels low cost and making electric cars appealing, and then we want to become multi-planet species and a spacefaring civilization. So there's rockets, and then
Multi-planet
there's things that
species.
It'll affect the future, but I'm not sure if this is good or bad. Like AI. That just worries me, that one.
Sure.
In fact, I think.
I just made video games. It's not bad.
Yeah,
But
I was gonna do all that, but I actually don't know how to do that. So
but I think it turned out in
It's
Fallout 3, the AI basically caused World War 3, as I recall, or something like that.
a little bit.
I don't want to spoil it.
I mean, is there a link there between sort of, you talk about AI and video game eye and, the technology in video games. Is there anything there that sort of, helps push technology that you think? I mean, you look at self-driving cars or other things. Like, are there things from video games that, you think help push technology forward?
Well, I think part of the reason I got interested in technology, maybe the reason was video games. So, I probably wouldn't have started programming if it wasn't for video games, or wouldn't have been.
Gamers cause
Technology if it wasn't for
rocket science.
Actually, video games are a very powerful force for getting young kids interested in technology.
Gamers cause scientists.
Than we realize. And generally, like if we're interviewing somebody for a software engineering role at
Everyone says they're a gamer.
it's a hard problem, and so a lot of people had to write really tight code and come up with really clever ideas to do that. If you look at someone like, say, John Carmack, who's an amazing software engineer, but he's also actually a really good aerospace engineer, and it shows like, problem solving. I think does transfer. Like you figure out software engineering problem solving and transfers to other things.
Carmack told me the best anecdote between video games and rockets. He said rocket AI is actually, for him, quite easy. Just thrust left, thrust right. Gaming AI is so much harder. The difference is when the game crashes, he presses reboot, and when the rocket crashes, it's a giant mess spread over several miles. Yeah.
That's a good one.
There's some joke about like if reality was a video game, it's sort of like the graphics are great, the plot's terrible,
Yeah.
and the spawn time's really long.
How has the stuff Elon done
Ooh, he's a gamer.
you do, Todd, in your world?
Well, I mean, the space stuff, as we look at Starfield, that's where we kind of look, okay, how are these things actually going to work in the future? Got to go to SpaceX last year. That place is like the Avengers meets NASA. Like, if anyone ever gets it, it's incredible. But what do those things look like as we do a science fiction game? But the other stuff in the cars and the self-driving is something I'm very passionate about. But that doesn't affect the game stuff. And I know that now you're putting games on the Teslas, so that's different.
Yeah, actually, thanks for helping out on that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we are. We talked about that, and we said, hey, would it be pretty cool? So we're actually working together. Skyrim on it. That's a little. we're gonna start a little smaller. So we are
Skyrim
working
on the
a
Tesla.
fallout shelter for the cars. Yeah, so it'll be
Oh
free.
my God, you
We'll have
friggin'
your
nerds!
little dwellers on the screen, like they live in the car.
You
Way.
nerds!
So it's a
You
great
stupid
starting
nerds!
How is this going to work with games? You've talked about,
You rich nerds!
all, being able to put Tesla. So this, you have to be in park when you play these, or how does this work?
Yeah. You have to park the car.
Okay.
The fun police make us park the car.
Okay.
So yes, yeah. Like we're also going to enable people to watch like videos, like streaming, through the browser. You'll be able to watch Netflix or whatever, YouTube if the car is parked and connected to Wi-Fi. So if you're say at a supercharger station and you want to watch something, you can watch it on the screen in the car. But the general principle is how do we, what can we do to make the car the most fun possible?
Video games!
What other cars just don't have?
Video games!
So it seems well, if there's you're just parked somewhere waiting for somebody,
Video games!
appointment, or you're on a road trip, it'd be pretty cool if you just
Video
on the
games!
screen and play some fun game. And we're just exploring how do we make it as fun as possible. You can already play all of the all the Atari games, or almost all the Atari games on the car. And we hooked it up so I can connect to Xbox or PS4 controller and actually have some pretty good control feedback.
You can hook up an Xbox controller
the Bart app,
to your Tesla?
my finest work.
Is there anything these guys can't do?
And it's there's you can actually make, by the way, you can make the fart sound like it's coming from any seat.
That actually is the funniest Easter egg, that one. Yeah, you can position it. And then actually the names of the farts.
Yeah.
There's the Falcon Heavy is one of them. Yeah. And I believe. Yeah.
So yeah, exactly.
What the fuck?
And I know you got
Oh my God.
you got some clips, right, of what this is going to
Yeah,
look
we
like?
can show some clips of some
What?
games.
What?
And it's just meant to be
What?
Hey, what are some cool games that people might like to play? And
What?
depending upon how much people play them, we'll
What?
add them to the higher on the list, or
But Tesla's gonna have video games?
archive that you can tap to download. Because the screen was not originally meant as a game player, so it doesn't actually have that much storage. But
What?
it won't have that many games on it at any one time, but it will just be okay, what do people really enjoy playing, and it might be a good way to pass time.
Oh boy.
All right, let's take a look at games on Tesla.
Games on Tesla. What? Yo, bro, we gotta get World of Warcraft on fucking Tesla. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have banged on my desk. What the fuck? Dude, if it could play Cuphead, we could play WoW. WoW is like an old game. Come on, it's 2004 technology.
All right, there's Cuphead. And that's not all. We got a second one too, right?
Yeah, it's got a racing game that you can either play single player or two player. So.
Is this 3D graphics or is it going to be 2D again? Oh, yeah, oh. I mean, that's pretty lame crap. The driving games on Teslas! Are you shitting me? Driving games on in a car. Are you fucking me right now? Holy shit, that is genius. You have a wheel! Oh my god! Hold on, I have to tell fucking general chat.
The steering wheel. I wasn't prepared for that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a racing game and you have a steering wheel, like, sitting right there, waiting to be steered.
You like, can you gas and brake? Will that work too? Or it's
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I think actually we've got the brake is wired in, and I think we'll probably have maybe the scroll wheel for the gas pedal, just so like somebody doesn't accidentally.
Launch yourself.
Stepping on the brake if you're stationary is not a problem.
Right. Gas could be. That's amazing. Well, it's so cool that you're doing that inside of the cars. I wanted to ask you guys about the idea. You're both certainly known for a ton of incredible successes in your careers. And you said before, Elon, that sometimes you're really only innovating if you're kind of ready to fail or have failure along the way. It shows that you are pushing for innovation. Todd, you've been through kind of quite a year with sort of Fallout 76, and you've been pretty public about some of the challenges there. Can you guys maybe riff a little bit on that, about sort of the push for innovation and how sometimes failure is part of that journey?
Usually when you get to take gaming, the things that it's the first time you see it and they're new, they become successful, but you got there by trying big new things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're going to keep doing that, and other game makers do that. And
Thank
I
you.
think it's good that the audiences are welcoming to that. They're gonna try it out and support us as we go through that process. To
Who
figure out,
just
hey,
froze us
make
all?
this tick, and we had obviously had our ups and downs with Fallout 76, but our fans are incredible.
Our fans
Now it's really turned into
are incredible at taking abuse. That's what I heard right there.
we've ever seen. It's fantastic.
I mean, through your career,
Oh God! Oh God! Todd Howard, don't talk to Elon. I don't want fucking Tesla to be like. Don't give him any ideas how to make money.
time to evolve, but that's part of
Our cars will start having DLC.
I guess, right? Is kind of having that vision and pushing for it.
Sure. I mean, if you're going to try something innovative, then you're in unexplored territories, so the odds that something will go wrong are pretty high. If it's only if you try to do something that is already well understood that there's little chance of failure, but then it will not be interesting or innovative.
You son of a bitch.
For sure, uncharted territory will result in failures. Necessarily.
Iron grenade.
Hard enough.
These some bitches have iron grenades.
Yeah.
Speaking of uncharted territory, you mentioned Starfield, which we haven't seen much on, Todd, besides one little trailer last year. But obviously, space is going to be a part of that. I'm curious,
Elon, you're a space guy.
But
You guys jack off to space
I
together.
do not have a clip. No.
Oh.
Sorry. Everyone needs to be patient on that. But what I can say is like how we approach it, so it feels it's a
Spacey.
game, but it still has an authenticity to. Okay, this could happen.
Yep.
We talked like what kind of fuel do the ships use? Like we're using helium-3, which we can debate whether that's a good power source for spaceships, or how do the physics work in space and gravity and those kind of things. And that's where you get into. We have to gamify it some, so that it's not as punishing as actual space travel, but that it feels like, hey, traveling in space in our game is still, let's say it's like flight in the 40, like it's dangerous. It's still dangerous to go and explore, but even though lots of people do it.
Yeah, space is far. That's the thing. It's like you have to definitely cut that short. It's like 40 light years, man. This is far. Even at light speed, that's pretty far. So, I mean, I think if you want to have a normal, based on known physics, like an antimatter drive would be the best. But that's still going to limit you to light speed, which is a long time. Yeah, I have to have some kind of warp drive, otherwise you're going to be stuck in one star system. So, I mean, just honestly, I sometimes feel like we're in some friggin' video game, I'm like, why is it just possible to get to Mars? Why are the stars so far away? This is just what I'd do if I was doing a video game. I'll put those stars, the little points of light. Don't worry about it. You can't see details. They're real far.
levels of detail. The stuff that Elon is doing with SpaceX, Are you looking at that when you're building Starfield? I mean, I don't know how far in the future it's set or sort of how that's looked. But
It's further in the future, but I like that. Going back to that risking failure and stuff. I think, I mean, kind of honestly, the world needs more people like Elon who say, I'm not sure how that works. I'm going to try this a different way. And a lot of people will doubt that, whether it's going to space in that way or self-driving cars. But I'm very passionate about those things. And as it comes to what's happening at SpaceX, it's,
Whew, that was close.
The physics of like the new engines or things like that, where, talking to Elon, how far could this go in current reality, and then how would we move beyond that in a fictional way? Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking a bit about that. Obviously, you're dealing with the reality of today, but something futuristic like what Todd's doing. Does that get you excited to sort of think about where's space travel going to go, and how can something like Todd's world simulate that or explore that even further off?
Yeah, I think like sci-fi movies,
Shit!
Video games, or video, and really I think people spend a lot more time on video games and movies these days. Can be pretty inspiring and thought-provoking about what's the future that we want. What are some like impossible-sounding technologies that maybe could work somehow? Like there's conceivably a way to do warp drive, but it's such esoteric, super out on the edge physics, because technically you cannot go faster than the speed of light, but space can travel faster than the speed of light.
What?
That's what's meant by warp drive. But the amount of energy you need to warp space is unbelievably gigantic. So, you'd have to be converting matter to energy at a rate that is cannot conceive really. It can't be like something like, well, if we just convert 1 Jupiter per second to energy, then problem solved. That's a lot, and there's not many Jupiters. So, and there might be a bit of radiation around that. So, there are things like technically the universe did expand faster than the speed of light. That's why we can see light from all these super distant stars. So it's kind of pretty wild that space expanded faster than the speed of light. So I'm sure we'll figure out some strange breakthroughs and come to grips better with this dark matter, especially, which seems like something's fishy going on there.
It has bad branding.
Yeah, exactly. The universe is mostly dark energy and dark matter according to current physics, but this kind of plug them in the equations and they sort of work. And this is not a good explanation. Nobody can find the dark matter. But I sort of figure, hey, if this is a video game and somebody had a bug in their orbital dynamics physics simulator, then that's oh no, we've got to figure out some way for these minions in here to believe that they're in reality. So insert dark matter.
But the idea of a game as a simulation.
That's twice he brought up simulation theory.
It's entertainment on some level, but there are games where it's it is more of a simulation. Or maybe not, but
Sure.
Is there value there in that, and sort of in kind of testing things and exploring ideas inside of a game world?
Yeah, actually at Tesla we have a whole sim team that tries to create a photorealistic world, and we're trying to be photorealistic about actually the most boring things like skid marks on the road and concrete curbs, shadows, faded lines on this. The reason self-driving is hard is because you have all these corner cases and things where the road should be a certain way, but it isn't. There should be painted lines, but there aren't painted lines, and they took the painted lines away, and then there's a skid mark that's offset from the painted line, so that will cause the car, if it just listens to the lines, to crash into stuff. If you had clearly painted lines and could count on them, self-driving would be trivial, just a piece of cake. But the world is just filled with all these things that are not the way they're supposed to be, and then the real trick with self-driving AI is to figure out what is the where should I be on this road that has no painted lines, or what lines have been painted wrong, and it's got skid marks and scratches and road work and all sorts of things that are unexpected. That's the really hard part. Otherwise, it'd be child's play. So yeah, we do a lot of sim at Tesla, and we have found a good correlation. It's like, does the car drive off the cliff in sim? Yes. Does it drive off the cliff in reality? Well, we got close.
I think you said it once. It's not the lines. It's looking for drivable space is more important than the markings in real life, because that's how your mind's actually working.
Yeah.
Even if there's a lane, you can't. There's someone there. Like, it's more drivable space that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, we recently found that we need we had like pretty good recognition of lines and what's technically drivable space, but we actually need what is road, and as opposed to what is the most probably the road as opposed to drivable space, and and then a whole subset on curbs. We're really into curbs right now.
Curbs.
Some curbs are really subtle, and some you should care about, some you shouldn't care about. Sometimes you go into a driveway and it's got a little curb, and then the car's like, oh, curb, can't go over that. Or it's like operating a drive space going through like a neighborhood, and then everyone's driveway is drive space. Technically true, but you don't want to go through everyone's driveway. It's not good.
But I was going to say, you think about like that. A lot of that stuff started video game wise, like image processing and things like that, and AI. And what they're doing there is,
Yeah, I'm
people
killing
look
your
at
dog.
technology now, they always underestimate how fast technology moves. In the present day, they don't cast back. You look at things. But I think the self-driving and what's happening now is going to fundamentally change the world in ways that people can't even expect.
Yeah, I shit on your dog.
But our children might not even learn to drive because the cars will all be driving themselves around, or how it affects cityscapes or parking lots, alcohol consumption. There's just like all these studies that are fascinating. Yeah, exactly.
Seriously.
So if you look at what are the best self-driving stocks? Alcohol companies. Because
Todd Howard, Elon Musk.
gaming companies.
Exactly. There you go.
Well, I mean, it's just like video games have drove computing technology, especially GPUs, massively. It's like that's the only thing you need a GPU for was
Elon Musk is a gamer.
massive resources put into rendering games to be more realistic, and then those same GPUs ended up being very useful for neural nets, and gave a huge boost to AI. So sort of video games to better graphics to AI, and then that same thing is sort of quite key to self-driving.
Yeah, I know you have OpenAI, and I wanted to ask Todd a bit about AI and game AI and sort of where games are going, right? So, you obviously have RPGs that are simulated worlds, and people have done things with, emergent behavior and other characters, radiant AI, things like that. But can you talk about maybe sort of where games are going in the next 5, 10 plus years in terms of the AI and the simulation?
Oh, shit.
That's going to sort of happen?
This is like spoilers into Skyrim 6.
There.
I think that's the part of gaming that's going to make the biggest jump. I think the graphic fidelity, most people react to instantly. They're looking at a screenshot or a video.
Yeah.
But there's some laws of diminishing returns there as things start to look better and better and better and better. But as far as how a game feels, the other characters in the AI,
Holy
I
crap.
think a lot of people, including us, have struggled with how do you make that feel real. And now that you can move some of that processing to the cloud, neural nets, and other things, I think that's the part where it's going to get significantly better over the next generation.
If that means what characters know you better, or what do you have any sense of how?
Reacting to things that you did in a more realistic manner. They're more reactive to what you're doing or the situation around them. The curb problem is this that you get that in a video game all the time.
We get to a point where these games become more sort of indistinguishable from reality, and I'm curious about what do you think sort of where do you think this goes ultimately as these games continue to improve, graphics get better, but then the simulation gets better? Do we reach this sort of singularity, this point where sort of the game and the world is the same thing. The simulation is what we are.
Imagine if we were to reach such a situation. That would be crazy.
What are we playing now?
I bet we see those these creatures in the game saying, "Wow, imagine if can you imagine if there was a simulation? Like you're in a simulation." Game saying
The same thing. The simulation is what we are.
Imagine if we were to reach such a situation. That would be crazy.
Elon Musk is trolling them about simulation theory.
What are we playing now?
I bet we see those these creatures in the game saying, "Wow, imagine if can you imagine if there was a simulation? Like you're in a simulation." And it's simulations all the way down. It's a simulation and a simulation and a simulation. Seems likely. I mean, well.
Oh shit, he's fucking dropping the simulation pill on them. He fucking drops the simulate 2919. Fucking 2919. Back to my Twitter thread. Hold on.
Colors.
At all. See those these creatures in the game saying, "Wow, imagine if can you imagine if there was a simulation? Like you're in a simulation." It's
things that you did in a more realistic manner. They're more reactive to what you're doing or the situation around them. The curb problem is this that you get that in a video game all the time.
We get to a point where these games become more sort of indistinguishable from reality, and I'm curious about, what do you think sort of, where do you think this goes ultimately as these games continue to improve, graphics get better, but then the simulation gets better? Do we reach this sort of, singularity, this point where sort of, the game and the world is the same thing, the simulation is what we are?
Imagine if we were to reach such a situation. That would be crazy.
What are we playing now?
I bet we see those these creatures in the game saying, "Wow, imagine if can you imagine if there was a simulation? Like you're in a simulation."
Ooh.
It's simulations all the way down. It's a simulation and a simulation and a simulation. Seems likely. I mean, well, if you assume any rate of improvement of video games at all, then one or two things are going to happen. Civilization will end, or games will be so realistic you can't tell the difference between them and reality. I postulate. Does this sound correct, or does it sound correct?
I don't know.
Yeah?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if it's a good thing, but it's just we could be somebody's video game right now.
Right. It's true.
Whose avatar are you?
Ah!
Think of kind of,
Ah!
never know. But, when you look at games and the games you play now, I mean, what are the things you want to see in games?
Oh my fucking god!
Anything that, when you play a game, you're like, I wish it did this, or I wish you're obviously thinking about, lots of things, but when you play games, are you satisfied, or are there things that frustrate you about games? What do you want to see games do in the future?
Elon Musk is a gamer, you guys.
I don't know if I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wants cat girls.
You working on a game too?
No.
Okay.
No. But I mean, I don't know. No, I mean, a bit more R-rated. I don't know.
Okay.
Ah!
I'm gonna be honest here.
Cat girls
theme.
What was it?
Popular theme.
Todd?
I don't know that I can follow that up. That's,
I mean, when you look at, the stuff that you play now, I guess you talked about Todd's games, but I'm curious kind of, wider spectrum, your kids play games, you play games. Like, what are you, what excites you? Like, what games are you looking forward to? What have you played recently? Like, there are a lot of games out there. What does it take for a game to attract your interest?
Sure. I mean, the last couple of years, actually, I haven't played a lot of games because it's been super intense work situation. So it's basically just work, see the kids for a bit, and then get like not enough sleep. So that's been the situation for a couple of years. So just haven't had much time to play games a lot. Probably the last game that I played a lot was probably Fallout 4.
Okay.
So that was a good one.
And then he was like, "I'm done. That's good."
Exactly. It's like, we're good. That's
Yeah, I've heard a lot about this game, Cyberpunk. I like the theme. It's like
awesome.
Yeah.
And we're actually that weirdly was what we decided to have our pickup truck as kind of like a Cyberpunk themed pickup truck that we'll be unveiling hopefully end of the summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Inspired?
It looks weird.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't look normal.
Okay.
Yeah.
And inspired directly by the theme of Cyberpunk in the game a little bit?
It was not inspired. I learned about the game afterwards.
Okay.
This is something we've been working on for a while.
Yeah.
But I just sort of I like the general idea, so it's sort of like sort of sort of has a slight Blade Runner feel to it.
Wow.
So it definitely does. It doesn't look like a normal car. It looks like it should not be on the roads, and it came out of a movie or something. But so won't appeal to everyone, but it'll be something that's different, and it'll be probably appeal to. I think I would buy it. So yeah, and I think like if like trying to work on something, and like my experience is like it's really hard to if you're trying to figure out what others love but you don't love it, it's really hard to make that great. So when you work on something, if you fall in love with it, that's a good sign. And then don't worry about if others do. If you do, others will.
I imagine the same.
Ooh.
How you probably feel about making games too, Todd? An idea that you have to love and play it?
Absolutely, and it's not just me; it's the whole team at Bethesda Game Studios. These are the kind of things we would line up at midnight to go play and buy, and that's what drives your passion to do it. And you have to be your own kind of tastemaker day in and day out. If you're always focused testing this with someone like this, you often miss the mark.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about is online play, and you've got these, a lot in the news recently, a lot about the Starlink satellites and the idea of, internet around the world, low latency, and gaming could be one of the sort of beneficiaries of this. Can you maybe talk a bit about that project and how it...
Yes. Starlink.
Sure. We actually, one of the design criteria for Starlink is to have latency for the initial constellation on the order of 20 milliseconds or below, which is important.
So hold on. I was watching a different video about the Starlink. There is a fiber optic cable connecting London to New York that like the bankers, the stock traders use to get super fast trading done. They say $1 million trades done in a fraction of a second. It bounces the market, and they make money on that shit. Elon Musk's satellite internet, will actually have 20 less milliseconds, from like 60 to 43. Holy shit.
Important for real-time gaming. And then the later sort of second generation, third generation constellations are aiming for sub 10 milliseconds. So this would be really great for any kind of real-time gaming. Yeah.
And it is across the world, you'll be able to sort of access that.
Yeah, anywhere on Earth.
Wow.
Shit.
That's, what's exciting. We look at, these cloud platforms, streaming, something like that. I mean, Todd, from a designer perspective, that must open up so many possibilities. I think about where games are going to go in the future, right? And
I think it's about democratizing who can play. Right now, there's still a lot of barriers to. I want to play that game. Okay, I got to buy that. I have this. I have to be somewhere. So having that be that you can approach it like any other entertainment. Like, okay, I listen to music. It's like you don't think about it. There's so many ways to do it, and that's where games need to be, where it's ubiquitous. It's not just in our part of the world where people are connected well. It's other parts of the world that are growing, and these billions of gamers who are coming into the scene who don't have the access that we take for granted.
Sure. All right, we'll do maybe a couple audience Q&A, a little AMA here. If
Oh shit!
We'll get a mic to you, and we can have a couple questions for these guys. This is a rare opportunity.
Hello, how you doing?
Good.
We're streaming on Twitch right now, by the way.
Woo!
Twitch. I
Okay.
had a question about the possibility of living in a simulation. When you think about like all the quirks, every individual personality, how things work on a cellular level, like the universe, everything.
Holy crap!
Doesn't it start to seem more far-fetched when you see how intricate?
Oh, he's calling him out. Oh shit! Ooh, oof, oof,
What do you
oof,
do?
oof, oof, oof! Yikes! Yikes! Elon, what are you gonna do?
The idea that
Oof! Oh shit!
Thank you. All right, appreciate it. Next question. Yep.
Hi. Big fan.
No fucking answer. What the fuck? You just made faces the whole time. Come on, stand up for simulation theory.
That's loud. Charles, where are your tusks? Yeah.
Yeah, we're on Tusk. You saying? Yeah, this is Elon Tusk.
Elon tusks?
Yeah. I've heard that before. That's upcoming episode of Rick and Morty.
Hey, Justin Roiland's up next.
Hey, Elon, thanks for coming. Thanks, guys. Elon,
God, these are cringeworthy.
flight to Mars. It's gonna take a long time to get astronauts out there.
Oh my god. Is every single question going to be stupid? Place your bets.
What kind of entertainment plan do you have? I mean, hopefully they're gonna be able to play games on their way to Mars. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. LAN party in space.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the woman right there. Behind you.
What the fuck, man? These are stupid questions. You're talking to a guy who's fucking reinventing the internet with satellites and space.
Mine is simple. Elon Musk, how much do I have to beg to get a selfie with you?
Oof, big oof. I wouldn't do it.
Sure, I'll do a selfie. Sure.
All right. Next question. Let's go as far back there. Yeah. The red shirt. Sit upstairs too.
This is for Elon. How do I sign up to test out your neural net program?
Well, you just put this USB-C port in your head, and and then don't worry.
I'm in.
It'll be fine. Might sting a little.
All right. Another one. Sure, right over there. Yeah, sure.
A question for Todd Howard. I live in the West End of Rockville, Maryland.
You have opportunity to fucking talk to Elon Musk, and you're like, nah, I'd rather talk to Todd Howard. These Todd Howard feels like some people. Todd Howard must have fucking like that moment there. A little ego boost for him. Fuck off, Elon. I want to talk to the Game Meister, Mr. Howards.
Are you looking for any interns by chance?
Oh, God.
Go to our website. There's a lot of job postings there.
All right, maybe just a couple more.
What the fuck? These questions are stupid.
Yeah, sure, right over there. Yeah, Mike. Yeah.
Hey, Elon. Wow, this is crazy. Yeah, so right now I'm trying to build like a tokenized game economy for gamers. So my question is, for 2 karma points and on behalf of our simulation overlords, can you sign my cyberpunk hat?
Sure.
Oh my God! Ask him a question about space travel.
We'll get it up here for him. All right.
2.5 karma points.
That's exactly. All right. Another one right here.
Why?
Mike down here. You got the glasses?
Stop it.
Karma does seem real.
Elon, I'm just wondering, with all the noise you deal with, there's lots of craziness. How do you stay focused? Because I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's insane.
His premise was you do stay focused.
Yeah, pretty focused.
It's so many things.
Man, I feel like the level keeps ratchet. Can we just turn that difficulty level down one notch? That would be really helpful. It keeps dialing up the difficulty.
Medium.
That's like Wolf Nightmare level.
Over here?
Okay, I'm gonna stay back. I'm gonna heal.
So this is a question for both of you. Actually, you mentioned failures before. What's the actual biggest failure that you've gone through to get?
Who is doing this spell? Stop it. You guys.
Who goes first?
That's a tricky question. It's funny. It's an interview question I ask people.
Knock it off.
And I don't.
You don't know your response.
People who are in the military have the best failures. Meaning like they crash satellites and tanks and things like that. I do not have a good answer for that.
I mean, we blew up 3 rockets in the beginning. That was bad.
Okay.
Actually, I only had enough money. Originally, I basically took all the money I made from PayPal, put it into SpaceX, to creating SpaceX, Tesla, and Solar City, and initially figured I'd keep half of it, and then I'd spend the other half on these crazy adventures that would probably fail. And then, unfortunately, they needed all the money, so so I had to give them all the money, and then I didn't have a house or I had to borrow money for rent. That was pretty difficult. That was back in 2008. And then we managed to scrape enough spare parts together to do a 4th launch at SpaceX, and that worked. And if it had not worked, SpaceX would have died. Probably would have lacked the credibility to raise the remaining money for Tesla. We wouldn't be here today. Or maybe it'd be like, not this ending.
For me, it would be.
Wow.
I guess for me, it'd have to be similar to the games we made in the period after Daggerfall. We made a bunch of games that just they didn't land, and the company was going to go out of business. And we got a lifeline, and then like, hey, let's do this game Morrowind. This is what we should do, and that saved the company.
Oh yeah. Yeah, remake Morrowind and stop.
One more question. Last question. You want to pick? Todd? Let's see. Up top. Oh, there's everyone up there.
I can't see through the lights.
I know, they're way up there. All right, yeah, maybe the hand way up there, yeah. Yeah, yell out your question.
I can't hear her.
Actually, we launch all the time. We do kind of 20 to 30 launches a year. Most of them are from Cape Canaveral. Some are from Vanderbilt here in California. And in order for people to really see the launch, like that super crazy visible, kind of look like a nuclear alien invasion from North Korea. Some of the YouTube videos are pretty funny. Yeah, 911 lines went ballistic. They broke down the 911 system. So we weren't actually. For us, we knew it was happening, so it was like, oh, it's a rocket launch. But the next thing is probably the Falcon Heavy launch at the end of this month. That's out of Cape Canaveral. So that's got the 2 side boosters that come back and land. This will be the most. We're pushing the envelope a little bit with Falcon Heavy, so it's more side load from the boosters and higher dynamic pressure, meaning like the ascent air pressure will be higher. It's just like pushing harder through the air. So that'll be an exciting launch to see if you're at the Cape. And then
nice.
Hopefully later this year we should be doing test flights of Starship out of South Texas and the Cape. This is a crazy looking vehicle.
Wow.
So
amazing. All right. Well, I think we're unfortunately out of time. Well, let's keep going on. Elon, thank you so much for coming to E3, being a part of this. This is so cool to have you here.
What the? Why was Elon Moscarino at E3? Elon Chan.
Thank you.
Why we gotta blast this sheetrock? All right.
The spectrum, and they add together to make what we perceive as light. And then there was a centuries-long debate about whether light was a particle, like this little tiny billiard ball, these photons that you shoot out, or a wave effect, like all the things that you see, waves in water and waves in matter, so on. And finally, we reached the conclusion that, well, it's a wave-particle duality that quantum mechanics talks about, and this is very unsatisfying when you begin looking at this. But it's really pretty much irrefutable. There are these straightforward experiments that can be done to show that you look at it one way, it's a wave, you look at it another way, it's a light, or it's a particle. So luckily for computer graphics, we hardly care at all about that. Only when you start looking at some aspects of surface reflectance models do you start caring at all about some of these quantum mechanical properties of light. For the most part, we can look at light as zillions and zillions of little billiard balls shot out from lights and bouncing off of things and eventually reaching our eyes so that we can perceive them. There's a lot of simplifications that have to happen when you talk about simulating this. There's a lot of engineering disciplines like thermal management, radio engineering that do simulations of the electromagnetic spectrum, just other parts of it, how they bounce around, interact with things. And this is done all the time, and it works. It really is science. So you can say rendering an image or deciding how much light reaches a particular area is about as basic of a science as it comes. There's not any artistic measure in here. There are tons of other aspects once you get into perception that do become questions about, well, maybe there is artistry that goes into producing something when you've got an impression that you want. But when you're talking about simulating an environment, which most of what we do in sort of the hardcore FPS type games is we are pretending that we've got this virtual world and we're running a camera through it and we're trying to simulate what's happening in various ways. And nowadays, we know what we would have to do to make that almost perfect. We just have nowhere near the computing capacity to do
ray tracing?
Really high-level simulations. But we can trace, it's useful even if you're not going to do the right thing to at least understand what the right thing is and then understand which trade-offs you're making and make them with sort of a clear head rather than accidentally backing into trade-offs that may or may not be really the best way to go about things. So many that it took a long time for people to realize that these other phenomena.
This guy is like a genius.
Things like radio waves, and there's a lot of confusion in 19th and 20th century physics about like which.
He's not a professor, but he could be a professor. He's just worked in private industry. You know what they say? Those that can't do, teach.
Which things were particles and which things were rays, and we still have kind of mixed up terminology when you talk about cosmic rays that are actually particles, and you talk about alpha radiation and beta radiation, and these things that are particle-based rather than being rays from the electromagnetic spectrum. But we use this stuff all the time for radio waves. Your Wi-Fi has 2 gigahertz frequencies. The visible light rays are up in the terahertz range, many terahertz. But they're basically the same thing. They just differ in how they interact with matter. They're produced in somewhat similar ways, but the different things change. They behave differently when they interact with other things based on their wavelength, which is why X-rays can shoot through things, radio waves can go through some things that visible light pretty much bounces off of. So another important critical thing really is that photons, the little bundles of light that we talk about, they are absolutely quantized. It's again part of the quantum weirdness that you can't send off this arbitrarily divisible amount, but there is an almost unbelievably large number of them. Given light that's throwing out is, I can just say zillions with a straight face because it's a very large scientific notation number. It's not trillions, it's not quadrillions, it's even more than that are coming out in terms of these bundled little quanta of energy. Now, they do have characteristics to them. If we treat them as little billiard balls, in computer graphics, we are generally looking at only a few different spectrums, of a few different wavelengths in the spectrum of light. And that has to do with an aspect of the human visual system. While there are this incredibly divisible spectrum of light that goes out, we're only susceptible to 3 sort of styles of light, and they're not even individual frequencies. That's why we can get by with red, green, and blue for our monitor's emissive spectrums, because we only have 3 types of color receptors in our eyes. And I often think how it would be really interesting if you could look at all of these other spectrums bouncing around, and that's what thermal imaging and some of these other things let you sort of get a peek into it. And that's only light that's EM radiation that's very close to the visible spectrum, the infrared. It would be much more bizarre and interesting to be able to visualize radio waves in a real-time space, to see all the multipath that's causing your Wi-Fi to be weird in specific ways, why moving something over here causes the radiation to change so much at your antenna to make a difference in your reception strength.
Wow.
And these are all things that have a bearing to what you do with light transport, as well as other wave phenomena like audio. Like really, really high-end audio processing is the exact same thing as what we treat light processing. You send out energy, it bounces off of all sorts of things in the world, and eventually arrives at something that's going to perceive it, which would be your ears in that case versus your eyes. So to kind of start with the path of a photon and what it would take. You've got something creates the photon, and for the longest time in our human existence, about the only thing that we saw creating photons was a great deal of heat. You heat things up hot enough, and photons start coming off of them. You heat it up enough, it starts glowing a dull red. You heat it up more, it starts getting more yellowish and towards white as more and more of the colors of the spectrum are emitted from these hot things. And obviously the sun is a very hot thing where you've got a fusion reactor going, and the light that comes off of that is all of these atoms giving up some energy. So photons carry energy away from where they came from, and this is radiative heat transfer, where something gets hot. If you leave it all by itself there, it glows, and it eventually stops glowing. It cools down, going down through the spectrum, getting cooler and cooler until you don't see any visible light, because it's actually lost much of its heat. On Earth, radiative heat transfer is the least effective form of heat transfer. You get much more from conduction, where it just kind of goes through the actual physical contact into other areas as the heat spreads out, or convection, where moving currents of air or water take the heat away. But in space, radiation is the only way you lose heat. And in aerospace engineering, this is extremely important. Things like the areas like the International Space Station and spaceships, they have to worry a whole lot about thermal management, because the only tool they've really got is radiation. You see these enormous solar panels where they collect solar energy, but a lot of space vehicles have to have enormous radiators where they actually let the energy go out from the vehicle. Otherwise, they would get hotter and hotter. So it's important to note that even if it's not glowing so that we can see it, everything's still radiating. So you don't see the space station glowing red hot. It's just glowing at whatever its normal temperature is, which can be perceived with infrared sensors. But it slowly loses energy, and it eventually reaches a balance. That's why something stuck out in the sun in space doesn't get hotter and hotter. Eventually it reaches the point where the light that's coming in and hitting it is equaled by the radiation that's leaving it. And there are, like you can make we've made rocket engines that are radiatively cooled, where they burn 5,000 degrees or so inside, and they get so blindingly white hot on the outside that all of the energy that's not going out the nozzle, that's soaking into the walls, is radiated away as a whole lot of light. And this is essentially what old-style incandescent light bulbs were. You had a tungsten filament, you made it really hot by pushing electrons through it, and it got hot enough and it started glowing. And if you watched closely, if it was a heavy filament, you could watch it warm up or especially shut down. It would go through, kind of ramp through the temperatures. You would see it be red, get up to white hot, and then when you shut it down, it would cool down through yellow and then back through red before finally settling back to radiating in non-visible regions at sort of room temperature eventually. Nowadays, we have a lot more efficient ways to create photons with fluorescence and LEDs, things that are tuned carefully to just barely nudge the electrons in the atoms out to an excited state, let them collapse back down, and spit a photon out. For the most part, photon emission is random in terms of which direction it goes. When you look at radio engineering, there's huge bodies of literature for antenna design that determine how you can make it slightly stronger or weaker in different directions, but there's still a very fundamental nature of randomness, which is again the quantum mechanics aspect of things. There's at a very low level, natural events are completely random, and you can't just say, I only want photons that are going to come out of the left side of this material. So you get a photon that pops off in some random direction. It may go straight for, if it's coming from a distant star, it could go straight for trillions of miles, more or less just traveling through space. There's little bits of general relativity with warping of light that can happen, but for the most part, it can continue on indefinitely. It's a self-propagating wave. So it pops off of some atom somewhere, maybe flies through space for 1 billion trillion miles or something, comes in, finally hits our Earth's atmosphere, and then starts interacting with the atmosphere in some way.
Wow, man, this is intense.
knowledge in for November FPS didn't exist.
Finally.
The first FPS that we made, Hover Tank 1, was a solid-filled polygon maze. Catacomb 3D was our first texture map 3D game, and Wolfenstein 3D would be our first VGA 256 colored FPS. And Doom would be a pretty huge jump in technology beyond that. So we moved the company from a one-bedroom loft apartment that was in Mesquite, Texas, to this black cube that was just down the street. We were located on the 6th floor of this building. Eventually it was Suite 666. So we continued to play Dungeons and Dragons, as we had for years. While writing the Doom Bible, we needed a new file name suffix. So up until that point, every game that we had made in DOS had a shortened version of the game's name as the suffix. So Wolfenstein 3D was W3D, so it was like, wolf.exe, but graphics.w3d. Spear of Destiny was SOD. But for Doom, Tom decided on WAD, which was short for Where's All the Data? It's all in one giant file, that's where it's at. So Tom was working away on the Doom Bible, which even back then we didn't call them design documents. We just had to come up with a name, so we called it the Doom Bible. The early design doc for Doom was basically completed on November 28th of 1992. So he came up with several characters, their names, their backgrounds, lots of other stuff. It's actually a pretty big book. This is one of the pages from the Doom Bible. Describes a preview of what the game will have in it. So some of these features were not in the game, like cinematics. Up until this point, our games progressed by going from one level to the next. Always reaching the end of a level where the game would then load the next level. John Carmack had a more advanced vision of progression, one where players could smoothly progress within one huge streaming map, not unlike World of Warcraft. So in practice, as he was writing this Doom engine, it proved to be very impractical for several reasons. So John's new world vision of level progression became more traditional. So we were back to level by level progression. There was just too much other tech in the engine. So Tom worked for a month on a really big seamless world. And he had to toss it away and get to work on creating new discrete level locations. So now, it's November 1992. We started getting the engine tech working and the level editor Doom Ed up on the screen. Tom Hall, pictured here, was playing with it. He was offering suggestions. He was in the big open room that we had and not actually in an office like the rest of us, so he just drew lines on the floor with masking tape. On Tom's monitor at the top is the word quality, in case you were wondering what that was. At this point, Tom was kind of a little unhappy after having to redesign the game to play level by level. And this is after, earlier in the same year, 1992, having to, fight for push walls in Wolfenstein 3D. So creatively, it was kind of a struggle. So, unbelievably, we issued a press release just as we started working on the game. Not before we release it, just as we're starting to work on it. We basically said that Doom was going to have the greatest technology ever in a computer game at the time. That's what you do when you're 25. So this is a list of the features that the game would have. The most important being the last line, an open game. So this month, in January, we wrote a tool called the Fuzzy Pumper Palette Shop, which took video captured images and palletized them to our custom VGA palette that we had hand created for Doom. So I continued working on Doom Ed, and things were starting to really begin on the game after the holidays. Like this was the month that we started for real. So in February, this is Adrian Carmack. he's modeling the Baron of Hell based on his sketch that's right in front of him. Kevin, which was the other artist on the game, there were only two. Kevin created the Imp in Deluxe Paint 2 on the PC. And when clay ended up being a bad idea for animation, we turned to a Hollywood monster creator, and he made a few models for us. So the first one that we needed was the Spider Mastermind. It was made with latex and metal, and we needed him for the end boss of episode 3. And you could tell that everything moved on him, so animation was actually possible. We decided that since we were scanning most of our models, why wouldn't we scan weapons as well? So even though it was Texas, we decided to get toy guns from the store. It was safer that way. We're game developers. We're going to shoot somebody accidentally. As the design of the game was influenced by the movie Evil Dead, we decided that we wanted a chainsaw and a shotgun in this game. So this is the actual chainsaw that Tom Hall brought in. His girlfriend had one, so he just borrowed it. It was called the Eager Beaver, and we kept it in a bowl because it leaked oil. Tom actually still has this chainsaw. So the shotgun was actually what's called a Tootsie Toy Dakota cap gun. We got it at Toys R Us, which is like around the corner.
Dude, the legends.
At the same time that we're trying to figure out what levels would look like, as we're building the game, we're trying to figure out what are the levels going to look like. This technology can do a lot of stuff. So for our entire lives, until that point, the only kinds of game levels that we'd really seen were 90-degree block walls like Wolfenstein 3D. So Might and Magic, Ultima, Wizardry, MIDI Maze, Labyrinth, Way Out, you name a maze game, it had 90-degree walls in it. There really weren't any examples of anything else. So it was a struggle trying to kind of break out of that mindset. John Carmack told Tom, hey, get some books about military building construction. Maybe that'll help. Tom did that, and he got really bored with it, as they're not very inspiring places to play in. So it was kind of burning Tom out, this wall that he hit. So the first level in Doom was called the Hangar, and originally it started like this. Actually, it started with this other thing. There's four Marines were playing cards on a crate. You'll see it in a second here. This is like the original UI that we had in the game, because we thought we were going to have an auto map in the corner, and everything, all kinds of stuff like you have this cool helmet on. And there's the crate that you would start at. But we eventually removed all that UI because we want to see more of the game world, and we could actually do it at a good speed. So here is what Doom looked like on February 4th, after 1 month of work. It didn't have any sound. There was no sound in it at that point. So it was Evil Unleashed was like a subtitle for the game. So you can kind of see just barely moving around. I don't know if you can even hear that off of my headphone. Yeah? Oh, I see. I'll turn it down so it's not so loud. All right, we will have sound in a second. Okay, got it. Okay. Now you can hear the music that was created in the future beyond this prototype. Baron of Hell, you can see that we had the UI up on top of everything. The engine still wasn't as fast as it was going to be, but it was actually rendering. You can see the mouth even has an orange color instead of a red color. Lots of little details that changed over time. So it's now March, which is our 3rd month of actual game development. something kind of random happened one day.
What? You allowed to play that?
No, we're not going to watch a movie. 20th Century Fox offered us the use of the Aliens license. So we seriously thought about theming the game around aliens. Around the game Alien, or the movie Alien.
Ooh, that's kind of cool.
It totally matched a lot of the ideas that we had wanted to put in the game and what we wanted the game to be. But then, you know, there weren't any demons and aliens. Just alien monsters, and that wouldn't really be a new idea. So we just scrapped the concept of using the license after talking it over for about 30 minutes. So one of the biggest problems, obviously, was trying to come up with a new way of creating levels, you know, that did not look like Wolfenstein. In fact, that became one of the defining concepts around level design was if it looked like Wolfenstein, any room looked like Wolfenstein, you have failed. So the military bunker style just wasn't cutting it. Something needed to be done. So one day I decided to solve the problem, and I created this abstract 3D level design style. I used E1M2 as my experimentation location. So you can see we still have that HUD up there, but now we're putting shadows in. That's a wall you don't really ever see in the game because it doesn't look that good. But this was the room, this was the entry room, but this room right here is the room where I actually created the height of the game, where it kind of felt like it was kind of cool. Back then it was really, really cool. Right now it doesn't look so cool, but it was awesome back then. So that was, you know, I even brought everybody in the room to see this piece of the level that I had made, and everybody agreed, holy crap, this is it. So this was the beginning of the abstract level design style. So then out of nowhere, disaster struck. All work on Doom stopped. If you remember, there was a Super Nintendo version that was supposed to be worked on. We hired somebody, but it wasn't done yet. We weren't even paying attention to the person who was supposed to be working on it. And the publisher was not pleased that the game was not done. I mean, this was like 9 months after. So we had to do the port to the Super Nintendo internally ourselves. So we had to stop working on Doom and just start working on the Super Nintendo version. So we had to actually learn the hardware. I mean, it's a Super Nintendo, it's not a PC. So we had to go back to 65.816 assembly language. Had to learn the hardware, and then we had to actually code the game, do all the graphics for the Super Nintendo and all that stuff, and it took us 3 weeks to do it. Yeah. Not too bad. I mean, we used to make games in 2 months, so 3 weeks was turbo mode. So then, work on Doom resumed. So we're all very, you know, back in the happy space. Okay, so we're now in April. Can't tell, this is month by month recreation. So while creating E1M2, the fun experimentation lab, I actually created a problem for John Carmack's renderer. The stairs that I show you there, they slowed the code way down because of the way that he was ordering the sectors. So John had to find a solution. It was basically recursing through a sector list, which kills things. So he found a white paper from a person named Bruce Naylor about this data structure called a binary space partition. So it was originally designed for backface culling of 3D models, but John adapted it for 3D levels to basically speed up rendering, and this solved the problem with E1M2, and it solved the problem for the entire industry for years. So this was the month that we hired Dun Punchats, who is an illustrator, to create the Doom logo and to work on the Doom box cover. We also created our first alpha version that we could send out to our testers. We're pretty happy to show some people what we were up to. And this is what the alpha version looked like after we've been working on the game for 3 full months. No, DOS doesn't play this music. This is added later. Still no sound drivers. So yeah, we were spinning titles around, doing some fun 3D tricks. We had just rotating in place in the menu, choosing levels. You know, if this gets out, you can all kiss your version of the game goodbye. We had rolly chairs that you could bump into, which were not fun and removed. We even had our rifle had a knife on the end of it for a while. We took that out. You can see how basic it is and just very boxy. This was one of the earliest levels in the game. You can see that we were really limited in our textures that we had at that point. The artists were going as fast as they could, generating textures, but they, you know, we could only get so much done as fast as possible with 6 people on the team, I think. Actually, it was 5 people. So there were 5 of us working on the game at this point until August. So you can see we're kind of using a lot of different textures here. Cement and this crazy wall texture. A lot of, you can tell that Wolfenstein's influence is still here because the height of the ceiling is kind of the Wolfenstein height. But then we eventually kind of break out of that. But the final level, this is E1M7, and you can tell the final level looks way better than this. But this is only after 3 months. So this version still, I believe, exists on the net. So you can, I think you can grab these versions I'm showing from there's an id history archive that you can grab these down from and use DOSBox to run them. These things leaked out somehow. And there's the exit. So we're in May now.
Wow.
Greg Punchatz, Don Punchatz's son, he was a Hollywood monster model monster maker. So after we had the clay models ripped apart, he basically started making stuff for us. He got several of them done this month. Our favorite, I think, was probably the Spider Mastermind. That was his first one, and it was very, very articulated and detailed. So this month we put out a pre-beta. That's how fast we're moving. Just another month and a few weeks beyond the last one. So almost 5 months worth of work. Now you can see we're using black and darkness more. The previous versions were less scary. They were kind of bright. Now we're actually kind of darkening the game. You can see like there's a menu that didn't exist in the final version, using high color DAC and some other modes. So we actually have a menu system in the game now. We're putting some options in there. Definitely there's a bobbing of the character. And we had named the difficulty levels. We have the key cards in there. We're experimenting a lot more with light and darkness. We decided that the game experience should have a lot of contrast in, yeah, it just disappeared. No animations at that point. We decided the contrast in the game in a lot of different ways was really good. So if we had, light and dark, tall areas and claustrophobic areas, suspenseful exploration, and then insane combat, and just mixing the entire game up with those 3 different things would make for something that kind of felt like a roller coaster. So nowadays, if you run the game, it looks a lot better than this, just because we're using 4K monitors and the game has been updated. But So back then, this was pretty cool. We can see, we're discovering that having dark things, things moving around in the dark is actually scary. And that was our world map in progress. So I won't go through all the levels, but this demo is probably showing all of them. Okay, so we finally are in June, halfway through the year. Chris Lombardi from Computer Gaming World, he came over to get a sneak peek of the game, and he wrote a really great preview article. It's the only one written about Doom. This was the only preview ever about Doom. And we also realized that we have too many biped monsters in the game, and we really need some flying ones. So this was kind of an oversight by Tom, and it kind of drove him further away from the team as he was just like getting upset creatively. So it's July, and Tom feels kind of isolated and alone. He's not inspired anymore. Feels like Id's over here, Tom's over there, Tom's not happy. So that's what happens in July, and then in August, basically, Tom decides to leave id. He was our creative director from the beginning of the company. So he came up with all the ideas for the games that we had made up until, probably about Wolfenstein. And so he went over to Apogee, who was our publisher before Doom, and we licensed Wolfenstein to let him make the sequel to Wolfenstein. So he was just calling it Wolfenstein 2 at that point. And then we decided, you know what, we don't want other people to make our sequels. So we told him, you can license the engine, but not the actual IP. So we told him we're not going to do that. So then Tom just made Rise of the Triad instead, which ended up being a really great game. And then he started developing a game called Prey. I don't think you can see that on there. Okay. And then the legendary game designer Sandy Peterson, who made Call of Cthulhu. And then the legendary game designer Sandy. We hired Dave Taylor, and then the legendary game designer Sandy Peterson, who made Call of Cthulhu. And now we are in September, getting close. Dave gets to work coding the automap feature in Doom. Sandy's cranking on making levels. He took a lot of Tom Hall's half-finished designs, and he finished them. With all the tech being made during the year, the sound drivers took a back seat to the game engine. Basically, the technical hurdle with the sound drivers was that the game was now in 32-bit mode, and we couldn't just use our old 16-bit drivers. So we found this library called the DMX Sound Library, and we included it in Doom. So now we can actually get Bobby Prince in the office and start making music and start making sound effects ASAP. So now it's October, and we created a press release version of Doom at the beginning of October, and this is what the press release version looked like. So this is with the actual music. No sound effects. I believe the sound effects came in probably 2 weeks or so after this press release. So you can see the design is getting a little more polished. It feels more like an actual game. AI is moving around. We have platforms and doors and all kinds of stuff working. In Doom, everything that you see that moves around in the level that's not a monster was something I programmed. So if you're going through lava, or you're going through slime and taking damage, or you see flickering lights, or doors opening, or stairs building up, or pretty much anything happening in the environment, I get to program all that stuff. Got power-ups. And then we have these unholy Bibles. I think you can see it down there at the bottom. We had a lot of demonic artifacts in the game originally. And also the sky didn't look like that when we released the game. We thought that having the blackness of space up there, even though it was more realistic, it didn't look that good. So we switched out the sky with a much better one that was taken from a book that had that was pictures of China. Really cool pictures of China. People actually sourced every piece of art that we ever may have scanned in or anything has been fully sourced, so everyone knows where everything came from. So now it's actually a game. You can tell how long it takes to get a game feeling like a game. I mean, we're in October now finally. After 9 months of development, now we have something that actually feels like it's going to be an adventure. Still getting stuck on walls. That part doesn't exist anymore. There's several things in this press release version. Now this is the E1M2 room that I originally created to do the abstract level design style, and now it's actually as scary as it should be. Blinking lights and everything. So this is what the game looked like then. All right. So we're getting close to wrapping up the game. Progress quickened. You saw that even in early October, we still had pickup items that were useless, like demonic daggers, demon chests, and other unholy items. So I decided to get rid of those things because they just made no sense to the core of the game. And earlier on, I even removed the concept of having lives in the game. Lots of games in the past had 3 lives. So now, it's November. It had to be just about the most insane month of development for Doom. So what we got done in November was the first IPX multiplayer was created that month. The word deathmatch, in that mode of play, and co-op play, and putting that all in all the levels. The final systems are all coded, everything. We had serial code for modems, so the game would work over modems, and then all the maps have been modified to use these brand new versions of the game that we had just created. It was a ton of work and a lot of polish at the very end. So the day before Doom, before we released Doom, it just happened to be a really important day in the United States. Violent video games was a topic hotly debated in Congress. So games like Mortal Kombat and Night Trap are shown as examples of the moral level that games have sunk down to. They had no idea. So we basically said, don't care, and we released Doom next day. Okay, so it wasn't quite released. There was one final bug. The last day we worked 30 hours straight, basically getting the game ready for launch. So there's this one bug. When we left the game running on all of our computers as like a burn-in test, just let the game run, some of those computers would lock up. Like they would just stop working. The menu could pop up, but the game behind it would just freeze. So John Carmack thought about what could possibly be happening. Like, this is insane. We're trying to release this game. He thought about it, and he figured out this problem, and then he fixed it. And it took like 5 minutes to fix the game, and this was a problem that was in the engine from the first day we started working on it. That's how good he is. So he did some more testing, and the bug was totally gone, and we could finally upload the game to the University of Wisconsin's, that's their mascot, University of Wisconsin's FTP server. So we basically begin uploading the game. You can hear it. We were uploading through modem. It took a long time. And then the server blew up. And then the server blew up a second time because there were basically too many people on the server. Everybody knew Doom was going to be released, and before we even uploaded it, the maximum number of people that could even download anything on the server was filled. and we had to have the sysop basically dump everybody off so we could log in to do it again. Blew up again, and then we finally had him give us some more time. So then the game finally got uploaded, and then it went everywhere. It went all over the place that day. So after Doom was released, basically the world changed. 3D games were absolutely here to stay. Shooters would dominate the industry for decades. It's the biggest selling game today, or the biggest selling genre today are FPSs. Game modding is incredibly popular, with many important game franchises that came out of modding, such as Call of Duty, Team Fortress 2, Portal, Counter-Strike, and many others. Multiplayer is a staple of games, and free-to-play / shareware is the most popular business model of our times. So I'd like to thank those who took the journey with me and made it all possible. Couldn't have happened without these people at that time, and the support of the fans of our games, obviously. So this was id Software at the time. Thanks.
Bunch of questions for you,
All
John.
right.
So I'm going to try to get through as many of these as possible. All right. So, first question: what is your one key ingredient you have in all of your successful games?
Made them with a team that was very inspired to make the game.
Every change in density that visible light goes through will result in it bending its path somewhat. This is called refraction. The most obvious case when you look at it is things like prisms and lenses, where you can see the light really strongly warped. But it happens in any sort of density change, going from the vacuum of space to the outer reaches of our atmosphere, and then every change in pressure or temperature changes the density, and that causes very slight and subtle movements of the changes in the direction of the light. And this is actually why stars twinkle out at night. If you're on a clear night and you see stars coming in from billions or trillions of miles away, it's going completely straight till it hits the upper atmosphere, and then it may slightly deviate, just tiny fractions of degrees, and this can cause the very small number of photons that you're seeing there to kind of come and go or move around in different ways. But the most important thing from a computer graphics standpoint are the effects that happen when it hits more solid matter, solid surfaces, or even liquid surfaces. And that's where it has the opportunity to generally, well, it can be even gas. You can wind up having the case of absorbing the photon. This happens rarely in gas. You can pass through hundreds of miles of atmosphere and not have too many of the photons absorbed. But it happens very rapidly in matter, in solid matter. A typical photon, when it hits a surface, might penetrate a little bit into it. A surface like metal will bounce off of just the first several atoms. It doesn't take many molecules or many atoms of metal before you can reflect light out, which is why you can make these super enormous space mirrors that are just a very tiny sputtering of aluminum on some plastic film, and they can actually make solar sails or giant solar collectors and concentrators. But for most other materials, the light can penetrate a little bit further into it. As it interacts with the molecules, it can either be absorbed, raising the temperature a little bit, going into eventually making it hotter so that it starts radiating out at some level, or it can redirect the photon in some way. You've got the minor redirections from the refraction, and much stronger ones when it interacts and bounces off of a solid surface. Now, there's a ton of different names. There's literally a couple dozen different names for the different ways that light can interact with surfaces. There's all the different types of scattering, of course, reflection, refraction. Reflection can be split up into specular reflection, diffuse reflection, and there's all sorts of different subcategories. I mean, optics is a huge topic. There are societies dedicated to every aspect of it, and there's huge terminologies for all of it. But for the most part, you can say photon comes in. If it's not absorbed, it's going to be kicked out some other direction. Then it can go and interact potentially with the atmosphere or potentially with another surface. And eventually, it's either absorbed, well, eventually it is absorbed somewhere, but for the most part, they're absorbed into the surfaces around us. But a tiny, tiny fraction of all the photons that are bouncing around eventually hits our eyes. And even when it gets to our eyes, which are mostly transparent, there's this chance that the photon hits and it specularly reflects off of our eye. And it made it all the way out of the billions of possible traces, made it to my eye, and then decides to specularly reflect off some other direction. But most of it that hits the eye and hits the lens gets through, propagates through vitreous and aqueous humor and all the little biological parts of the eye, and hits receptors in the back of our eyeballs that turn those eventually into neural impulses that our brain works with. Now, our eyes can actually be quite sensitive. The rods, the non-color sensitive part of our eyes, when they're fully dark adapted, if you've been staying outside for in a dark area for 20, 30 minutes, single photons can cause chemical reactions to happen in the, inside the rod cells. It takes a handful of them, a couple dozen, for it to turn into a neural impulse. But it is possible for people that, especially in the old days, people watching for things on ships in moonless nights that might be out all night with nothing but faint starlight, you can have cases of just handfuls of photons coming off of something being registered and showing up and people acknowledging their existence, which is pretty amazing when you think about these incredible subatomic particles, not even particles, but incredible, the scope of that being detectable by us as biological entities. And there are limits to what you can wind up detecting with light. Light has, the visible light that we see has a wavelength, and you can't really deal with things that are smaller than that, which is why you're never going to have a real picture of an atom or a molecule, because those are much, much smaller than the wavelengths of light. You eventually use electron microscopes and then scanning tunneling microscopes and these other things that don't deal with light at all to take those super tiny pictures, like the Boy and His Atom movie that IBM Research did, which was done with a little raster grid of atoms, which is really, in the fundamental sense of the word, deeply awesome, that we are dealing with matter, the very constituents of everything at that level, and we can make a little movie out of it. But those pictures have nothing to do with light, nothing to do with rendering, and basically the techniques that I'm talking about here. That's a completely different way of sensing what's going on at that level. So to recap the basic pictures of this, you've got something, a sun up here, spits out some light, travels through space, gets to the atmosphere on the Earth, maybe bends a little bit, maybe just goes straight through, comes down, hits a surface, maybe gets absorbed, maybe hits something else. You've got walls and rooms and bouncing around in there, and eventually, if we're seeing it, reaches somebody's eyeball inside. And that's the physics of what happens. It's really well understood. It does come down to a lot of data acquisition and characterization. When you talk about how the critical interactions with the surfaces, you've got your basic theoretical thing. If you talk about a flat surface, you say light comes in, what happens to it? That's the question of surface response. If you have a perfect mirror, and it's worth noting that to be, you don't have to be perfect on an atomic level to be a perfect mirror. You only have to be perfect at the optical level, which is somewhat larger. So people can make basically perfect mirrors, just highly, highly polished things. A perfect mirror will have the photon reflect off in this exact reflection. If you take the normal to the surface, you wind up with equal angles there. So highly polished surfaces act like this. When you get a reflection off of something like the surface of water, it'll behave like this. But most of the surfaces that we look around us do not behave like this. We have a spread of the energy where it comes in and it bounces off to some degree in every direction. No matter which way you look at most surfaces, you see, again, zillions of photons coming in. Some of them go in every direction. They just go in a direction that's biased based on the type of surface that it is. A surface that, one of the easy things that a lot of times is approximated, both in the engineering sciences and in computer graphics, is to assume that the surface reflects perfectly diffusely, or it's a Lambertian surface. And what that means is that no matter which way the light comes in, if it hits it completely edge on, completely straight on. It has an equal probability of going in every direction. And there are some materials that are close to this. If you take something like a block of chalk, white chalk, that behaves almost as a perfect diffuse reflector. If you light it from one position and you look at that like a little scribed out area on it from any different area around it, it will appear to have about the same amount of energy coming out of it. But there are, all surfaces are more complex than that though. Most of them will say, if you've got light coming in here, there will be more of it coming out around the reflection area and some general amount coming out in all different directions. But these can actually get quite complicated. And the simplifications that we use in graphics sort of approximate these, but you can measure these with specific tools that go in and take lots of samples from moving the lights around, because it depends. Unfortunately, this is one of the areas where it does get not so great for computer graphics. It depends both on the incoming direction and the outcoming direction. And those are two angles in each one, so it winds up being a four-dimensional equation to say how light comes in here, how does it come out in some other direction. And in fact, it gets worse than that because very few things do reflect just off of this upper surface. Most of the time, the light will go in, go below the surface, bounce around a little bit, and shoot out some other direction. So if you're saying, well, my photon comes in here, not only do you have to say, if you're being really, really accurate, which angle does it come off of, but also how far away from the original point does it come off of? Or if it's a thin surface, how does it come out on the backside? You may have other setups coming there. When you look at like a leaf in the sunshine, you've got a lot of the energy bounces off the shiny top face, but a lot of it diffuses through and comes out on the backside. So these are not pleasantly analytically tractable things. They wind up being big tables of data. And one thing that's important to remember is when you see like tables of data that are collected for things, don't necessarily capture all of the important characteristics of a surface. Where if you take one of these sensors that you can capture a table of data here, if you did have your perfect mirror reflector, it's almost certainly not going to have the exact sample exactly where you want. But eventually data does win. Just as we increase resolution on things, we'll have higher and higher resolutions for our surface models. And we'll get closer and closer to reality for what we're simulating. So to go as kind of a capsule history of computer graphics rendering then, when computer graphics started off, if you look in the 60s and early 70s, computer graphics research focused on the hidden line problem. You know, we had line-oriented displays, either true vector displays where, like the old video game arcade games like, I'm blanking out now. Yeah, like Asteroids is the best example. That are actually drawn by raster beams moving around where they really are true line displays. There's no raster, there's no edge aliasing. All the different games like that were what the earliest computer graphics systems were basically like that, where they were vector displays. And once people learned how to draw, figured out all the basic projective math to say, all right, I've got my cube here. You know, I want it to look like that, but when I draw it, I've got that on there. How do we figure out which lines that we're going to erase? And that was, you know, that occupied research for a while to figure out effective ways to do that without spending at the time the scary divide costs for different things, and you'd have lots of interesting work going on. But when we eventually got raster displays where we could fill them in, of course, at that point, people filled in the surfaces of the cube. They're all grayscale at that time, so you can draw a cube and say, well, this will be the light face, this will be the dark face. But that was neat at the time, but that was not sort of what things look like in reality. So people started taking the steps that they could to try and say, what do we need to do to make this more approximate what we see with our eyes? And this has been a path that's been driven probably more than half by sort of ad hoc approaches about just, well, what's reasonably easy for us to do that gets us somewhat closer to it, while there's also been sort of a parallel path of saying, well, what's the physics actually doing? How do we make an actual solution for it? So the earliest things that got added to the shading model for computer graphics was if we assume that there's going to be a light that's at some point, in the beginning it wouldn't even be local, you just say light is coming in from this direction. So we want to be able to say what color or what shade should each individual surface be based on where that light is. So you've got the obvious things that if it's not facing the light, no light hits it, and you would draw it black. So the question about things that are directly facing the light, so if you've got light coming in, if you have a surface completely perpendicular to it, you make that your brightest color. If you've got a surface that's completely parallel with it, it gets no light, and make that 0. So you've got some curve that goes between it to say how bright something should be. And it turns out that that's a fairly straightforward bit of math to solve, where you have light coming in at a certain angle, you've got the normal to the surface. The amount of light that would strike a little surface there is proportional to the cosine of this angle. And that's not an approximation, that's actually a bit of ground truth. If you've got the light coming in, and you've got something coming in at this angle, a surface that's, let's see, if you count the number of rays that go in on something catching 4 of them directly, turning it down, only covering two spaces there, all that actually works out correct. And this is the basis for a lot of the real calculations for light transport. Not a hack, actually part of real proper physics measuring. So once you've got that basic approach, you go back to your cube, and you get your light coming in, and you've got a brighter face, a darker face, and the faces away from it are completely black. And then most people say, well, we don't usually see things like that. So now we get into the fudging, and you say, well, let's just brighten everything up a little bit. We'll add an ambient term. So you sort of just add this minimum level to everything on the back side. And that helps a little bit. If you've got a cube, then everything looks pretty much great because it's a constant color just on the side that you might not see over there. But if you've got something more complex, everything that's not facing away from the light winds up being the same color. And it's clearly not correct. It's not what you'd like, but it was all that seemed reasonable to do at the time. The next step was to start looking at surfaces that are more than these perfectly diffuse reflectors. If you model your cube like this, it looks kind of like it was maybe carved out of chalk. And it can be a decent representation of that. But very few of the surfaces that we see around us are really that simple. Most things have some kind of a shine or highlight on them. And as we look around, you can see reflections and highlights on all sorts of things. And the obvious bits of metal and plastic, little things that you might hold in your hand. I can look at all these different shines and reflections on the plastic that I'm holding here. Now, the observation was made that the highlights on most objects that weren't completely mirrors, they tended to be something like a bright hot spot, like if you had your sphere here, you would have a bright hot spot that kind of faded a little bit around there. And just by looking at that and saying, well, what could we do that would be kind of like that? The observation was made that, well, if you take this sort of cosine arrangement here, this makes this nice broad fall off. It makes over the entire surface of the sphere, coming from that, it'll fade off till halfway around the light. But if you wanted something that was really tight, the thought was, well, we can just take this value and raise it to a higher power. We can just take this and go, square it, cube it, take it to the 20th power, which can be done, effectively mathematically quite cheaply. This has no basis in physical reality at all. This is a completely ad hoc approach, but it worked out okay. And this is what the Phong lighting model was about, where you separate it into your diffuse lighting, which is more or less what color the surface is, and then your specular lighting, which is what the highlights are going to look like. So you had this other value to play around with, and that was the specular power. And nowadays, I regret using that in my terminology, where we have power maps and nobody understands what those are. They relate to the specular exponent, what you're going to take something to a power of to tighten it. The better terminology that's used more often now is a roughness map, where you have a mapping, and you also do it in logarithmic space rather than linear, but more or less that's still today what a lot of graphics involves, is you've got a roughness parameter which affects this exponent that you take this extra vector to generate your specular highlights for. And again, it would make, so if you're rendering your cube and you get the light at the right angle, like if I'm looking at this here and the light's over here, it hits that. If that's at that right reflection angle, then you'll get a nice bright shade on there. That flat surface will catch the light and it will glint at you, and that would be looked at as a real advance for the rendering. So you've got something that looks diffuse, but when it moves into the light, it kind of catches a flash of light and fades out. So the facets on these solid shaded models started looking better. Now, the next thing that people wanted to do is, okay, we've got enough cubes and tetrahedrons and dodecahedrons and whatever, so we want to start making things that look more realistic. We need to have a teapot. We need to have a curved surface in some way. So you make some curved surface like this. There was a lot of work in the early days on directly rasterizing curved surfaces, drawing them directly, but all the real-time graphics, almost all of it, has been a matter of turning your curved surfaces into approximations with flat surfaces. So you've got something that is theoretically a curve, but really it's a bunch of facets. So if you apply the lighting model there to it, you see all of these facets. It stands out as like, okay, you've carved this out with all these flat planes, and it doesn't fool you into thinking that this is this smooth curved object. So the next step in graphics that went on was adding the interpolation across the vertexes, where instead of calculating a value for a face, you calculate it for a given vertex, for one corner, and then you just average. You interpolate across there so that a point here is going to be some average between 3 or 4 of the points that make it up. And that works surprisingly well. If you're looking again at a diffuse surface, it works out just about as good as you'd like. There are some minor artifacts called mock bands that you get if it changes too much, but if your tessellation's okay, that works out all right. It works out less well with the specular highlights. And the reason is that your specular highlight, if you've got, it might show up, like if you were supposed to have some hot spot right here in the middle of a surface, if you calculate it at the outside, this is going to be almost 0 for the specular, almost 0. And when you interpolate across it, it's going to have nothing. You're just not going to see it. You'll only see a highlight when the specular comes up at the very edges. And this is what still to this day sort of the standard OpenGL shading model is. It's gross shading with calculations at the vertexes, interpolating the colors or parameters across it. So this model is still with us to this day for a lot of sort of quick stuff that's not visual simulation oriented. If you just write something using lighting with OpenGL, that's the model that you get if you turn on specular highlights. In graphics where they care more about visual quality, what started happening was interpolating not the color across it, but interpolating the normal, sort of the curvature across each point, and then applying the lighting model at every pixel. And at the time, this was like a flagrant use of processing power, because we're like, okay, these calculations are expensive. We have to do these distance calculations, dot products, exponential power stuff. And when you just do it at each vertex on your cube, okay, so you've got a handful of vertexes that you need to calculate. But even on an old school display, you would have hundreds of thousands of pixels. And so if you're drawing that there, going from doing this maybe a few hundred times or a few thousand times to hundreds of thousands of times for a scene was a large use of additional processing power. But it got you the good-looking areas where you could have a highlight that looked about like it should, moving across the surface, or sitting on a floor, looking stable there as you moved around. People that have been following PC graphics for the last couple decades, we've seen games that that do not have interpolation in different ways where the lighting would change dramatically. We always had the problem of densely tessellated characters or objects and then very low tessellation on the world. And the problem that you'd run into with that is that if you're applying one of these interpolation schemes to it, you would have something that you could never have highlights in the middle of a surface, only at the corners. And there were also issues with perspective math and clipping that would mean that it would change as a really big polygon get clipped by the edge of the screen in almost all cases the way people did it. And this was one of the big things that pushed me during the Quake time frame to use light maps for the first time, where instead of, I had seen other games that were doing lighting at the vertexes, and I didn't think it was, it wasn't good enough. You couldn't get anything resembling a shadow. You had all these swimming artifacts with the lighting, and it just didn't give the, what I wanted to see. And while Quake didn't have any specular highlights, it did have these, you had samples every 16 pixels in the light maps that we interpolated across those, and that gave us the look that was very important for it. We didn't get to actually, it was only all the way up to Doom 3 where we would start doing per pixel operations like this to get the much better calculations. So even with this level of graphics at that time, where you've just got sort of these Phong lighting, simple models, hacks like the specular exponent and the ambient term, we started to see some offline things being rendered, like some movies. Early work, some of the early NASA promotional work that Jim Blinn did were significant in the sort of growth of all of this. And then we finally saw some feature theatrical films with like The Last Starfighter and especially Tron, where you would see, you go back and you look at Tron and you have a lot of these sort of Garo-shaded, solid modeled things on there with your light cycles or recognizers and so on. And they were doing something, they were intelligently picking a battle that could be won at the time. If you said, well, we have to go ahead and render photorealistic humans, we were nowhere close to up to that task. But we could do geometric solid models that looked good enough to show on the big screen, and that was, that was a pretty big breakthrough. And simultaneously with this, there was an alternate approach to the way graphics were being drawn that so most of the early graphics were done with rasterization, where if you've got your computer screen and you've got your quad on here, you would draw this on a computer by calculating these equations of the lines, and then you would usually just kind of walk across, building up your rows of pixels. The whole process of hidden surface removal is another step on top of this, where if you've got lots of cubes, how do you know which one draws on top of the other one? And this was another thing, if you look back in research from the 70s especially, there was tons of work going on hidden surface removal of these clever different algorithmic ways. Today we just kill it with a depth buffer. We just throw megabytes and megabytes of memory and the problem gets solved much, much easier. But this path of rasterization is still with us today. GPUs don't rasterize in scanline order like this. They follow crazy winding paths to maximize memory bandwidth, to fill up tiles, to rasterize them in different pieces. And they rasterize all quads at a time, but it's still essentially a rasterization method where we have shapes and we figure out how to rasterize them, we figure out which pixels they're going to cover, and then we figure out what we want to do to them. The alternate scheme, which was also developed in the later 70s, is ray tracing, where instead of saying, all right, I'm starting with my object, I'm going to take these vertexes, these 4 vertexes that are in space, I'm going to take my virtual camera, and I'm going to transform them and find out where they are on the screen and then fill them in. Ray tracing goes the other way, where you start off with your camera in space somewhere in your little virtual viewing screen, and through that, you send rays out into your world and you intersect them with your cube over here. And if it hits that cube first, it knows it didn't hit anything behind that. It's got a surface point there, and it can apply whatever shading model it needs to. The thing that ray tracing gave, I mean, it's radically slower, like hundreds or thousands of times slower than rasterization if you're doing just the most straightforward thing. If you just want to draw that cube, you can draw the same thing with rasterization or ray tracing. It's just going to be 1,000 times slower with ray tracing. But it allowed a couple things that were either very difficult or impossible to do properly with rasterization. And the thing that you would always see in ray tracing demos is your shiny reflective spheres. So you've got a little chrome ball, and the fact that you could see the world reflected into it and then back into your eye was the thing that ray tracing could do that rasterization couldn't do really worth a damn at all. I mean, you would approximate it with environment maps and different things, but for reflections and for refraction, doing those things properly, ray tracing was really the only good solution. But it wasn't practical even for most offline work. There are, I can remember looking at old research papers of things that are run on DECVAX computers, and they talk about the number of hours to render these really trivial scenes, just a few boxes and maybe a sphere sitting there, and the idea of rendering like complete worlds with it was fantasy at the time. But it did address some of those problems for the first time with reflection and refraction, and it also much more elegantly solved shadows, which all of this stuff talking about surface interactions and finding out what you hit with the light, that kind of dodges one of the really hard problems, which is saying that, well, the light obviously doesn't reach through things. If you transform something up here and you transform another surface down here and the light's up here, this should be in shadow because it's blocked by this, but that turns out to not be a particularly trivial thing to resolve. It's basically the same problem of how you view something from your point of view, but viewed from the light's point of view. And that can mean that, well, if every light in your scene has to do similar rendering process to what your view does, possibly harder because they're omnidirectional lights in many different cases, and it's just a tough problem. And as with so many things, there's a lot of wonderful research in the 70s and 80s going through about how you do shadows effectively with these different analytic solutions. In the end, we had a brief period where stencil volumes were an effective way to do things, but now it's essentially all shadow buffers, where we really do take every light, render an image from their scene, and use that to back project onto there to figure things out. But that was one thing that ray tracing had an elegant solution for. Again, if you're already 1,000 times slower, who cares if you're another factor of 2 or 3 slower? For every point you hit, you go ahead and say, I've got my light up here, I'll trace to the light or to however many lights I've got, and if there's something that blocks it, then that's going to be shadowed and I can take it out. So ray tracing always had this much clearer abstraction of what you're doing. It's easy to tell that you're sending out a little array, you hit something, you determine whether you hit all of the other lights or if you bounce or refract into something else. So it's always been easy and clear. It's just had this 1,000 times slower problem to deal with. So the advances that were being made on graphics kind of after this early age focused on the changes in what you can do with the surfaces as the first obvious thing. And a lot of these were driven by sort of artistic and aesthetic concerns, where we got, if you pull up a 3D rendering program and you look at their material stuff, there's a whole page full of options, things that you can tweak, knobs you can turn, checkboxes you can set. And each of these had some use case where somebody wanted this because it made their image generally look a certain way that they wanted. Very rarely were these things driven by sort of physically correct rendering. And there was a huge plethora of these things that came out. Every different program had a different set of options. You always had this fallback of you've got your diffuse colors, your specular color, your roughness. This basic Phong shading model persists to this day, but now we have a ton of other things that we can tag on there, things that are subsurface scattering approximations, Fresnel lighting, different frequency response on surfaces. It's like some of the things do have physical basis to them. Like one obvious thing, the Fresnel effect is the effect that as you get more and more glancing to something, the reflection gets stronger and stronger. And you see this is what makes water and glass look like water and glass. If you look straight at them, you pretty much see straight through them without a whole lot of reflection. But as you get more and more edge on, even a surface like this, where when I'm looking at this angle here, I've got a very, very strong, clear sense of the slightly wavy reflection of that white line there, while if I look at it right here, it's barely visible. So that's a physical effect in reality that you can work through the real physics equations of why this happens, but people again sort of called up the trusty raise a cosine to a power, and it sort of looks like what we want when we're dotting a couple vectors together. So that's something that's based off of plausible physics, but generally only roughly approximated. And there are other things like that with like the change in some metals get their metallic look because they slightly change colors as they get towards grazing angles. So again, you can calculate the real physics for that, or you can just kind of say, well, this color sort of changes to this color at the edges and start interpolating between them. But lots and lots of good work and lots of lots of
Almost
high-budget
exalted.
movies and so on were built with these sort of very ad hoc techniques. But sort of in parallel with this, the other big revolution that was happening was global light transport, global illumination. It comes back to that whole hack of the ambient term, this sense that obviously okay, if I'm right here, the lights are only directly hitting the outside. The back of my hand has no direct view to any light, but it's still quite bright and clearly illuminated. It's bright because all those lights hit this whiteboard, bounce off of that, and wind up lighting my hand from the back. And you can see like color changes, like if I move up here where it's mostly covered by the blue marker on there, there'll be blue tints to it. And this recognition that so much of what we consider important in the visual field is actually indirect. It's not just a matter of here's the light, here's the surface, what's the reaction. Because we come back to how much of the light gets bounced around. And there's a term called the albedo of a surface, which is what fraction of the light gets reflected versus absorbed. And there's some tricky terminology with this because you can have either the total solar albedo, where you talk about how much energy comes off of the sun, and this is used for climate modeling and some remote imaging and things like this where you matter. But you've also then got the visible albedo, which for rendering is what we care about. And the point is that the best reflectors, your chrome sphere that's mirrored or your white piece of chalk or your freshly driven snow, those can reflect 90-ish% of the light, while your darkest surfaces, your lump of black coal or asphalt in some cases, might only reflect 5%. But when you're reflecting 90% of the light, what that means is that if you're in a room that has mostly white surfaces, a single bit of light coming out of your light emitter might bounce around a dozen times before it finally gets absorbed. So it could take a very complex path before it winds up getting to your eye. And this is why we can have cases like a dark room illuminated only through the crack under the door, but you can still wind up looking around, even around corners. You can go into the closet in the dark room illuminated under the keyhole and still find things somewhat lit. And that's because of this many bouncing path that light can take from the light emitter coming around till it actually gets to your eye. And this turns out to be a really frighteningly complex and expensive problem to solve properly. The first sets of attempts at this dealt with radiosity approaches. And a lot of this was driven by engineering things beyond just making pictures, because you would talk about things like heat management. If you have a certain amount of energy coming in here, how hot is something going to get, and what's the hottest part going to be, because that matters for a lot of engineering terms. So you can do things like, make a complex surface here and say, energy is coming in here. How much of this energy makes its way to here, to here, here, here? And it's not just a matter of that's basic geometry calculations to say how much of this is directly impinging on that surface. What gets complicated then is you say, well, this reflects 50% of its light, and that 50% goes to all of these different ones here. And this one reflects 50%, and that goes to all the ones here. And in theory, if you're doing everything floating point math, you can keep saying you can bounce it 100 times and say you get, 0.00001% winds up coming back to another spot. At some point, you just say it's converged well enough, the solution is not going to change much on no matter how many more bounces that you do. So the radiosity solutions work by creating this giant linear algebra matrix of coefficients, where you identify all of your surfaces and you say what form factor, what fraction of the energy goes to all of the other different surfaces, and then you may be solving this 10,000 by 10,000 matrix. And there was a lot of work on the optimizations that go into solving this more effectively. But there are two reasons why radiosity is not a particularly relevant technique for computer graphics anymore. One aspect that it sort of glossed over was the notion of occlusion, where if you've got a surface, if this goes out here and you go around the dark corner, all right, we've got this surface here. It's clear that it can't see this surface at all. It can see this surface, it can see part of this surface, a fraction of it, and it can see an even smaller part of this surface over here. So you have to calculate these occlusion terms where you're saying each surface, unless you're in your deformed stretched icosahedron or some surface, solid that has no concavities inside it, you're going to have these aspects of occlusion. And this becomes a very, very difficult thing to solve completely analytically. If you're trying to stay in just analytic world, and you try to solve, well, okay, we have this surface occluding this surface, and then another surface here, and another surface here. It's the potentially visible set problem on every polygon, and it's an analytic nightmare. So you wind up solving this by approximating. You just say, all right, I've got a surface here. I'll throw a bunch of rays to test out here, and I'll throw 20 rays out, and if 10 of them get through, I'll say I'm 50% occluded. Now, a purist will start blanching and saying, well, yeah, but that's random. There's this randomness. You might be misestimating. There could be pathological cases. And there's some truth to that. Anytime that you're sampling things, there are sampling cases that can turn out pathological. But the other side of that then goes, it's like, well, we're tracing rays. We have another technique that involves lots of tracing rays and come about it from the different rays.
Wow, this is deep. God, this is obnoxious. And that is not a good remix. I'm looking for the one that has the rapping on it. The one where he rap it like this, cause he keep the beat to the song easy to rap to, cause the beat's really simple. Even I can't keep a beat. Come on, mount up, you homo fuckers. We about to kill the Alliance right now to this jam right now. I can't rap. I can't rap, yo. Don't even ask me. Yeah, but why is this a remix? It sounds like the basic song. What the hell is this shit? Ass. Hole. Okay, this might be bad, but let's hear it out. Oh god, this is bad.
All my life I want money and power, respect my mind, no doubt.
Oh, you wanna go, bitch?
I pray my dick get big as the Eiffel Tower, so I can fuck the world for 72 hours. Goddamn, I feel amazing. Goddamn, I feel amazing. Goddamn, I feel amazing. Damn, I'm in the matrix.
That was some fucking pro level shit by this guy.
Martin had a dream. Martin had a dream. Kendrick have a dream. All my life I want money and power, respect my mind, or die from last child. I pray my dick get.
Is this the legendary beat that anyone can rap to? All you gotta do is sound passionate and speak your heart, and the music will flow out your soul. Just let it keep going, never stop. The moment you look back, you'll trip, and when you trip in, you're not following your dreams. You gotta keep the. This isn't it. Army of the Pharaohs. It's something like that.
Prepared, yeah, the ones who drink gas.
This is some ancient Egyptian music. No, that's not what I want. I don't want ancient Egyptian music. Japanese trap beat. Trap panese. This is offensive to somebody. It's offensive to my ears. Oh god. Rap. Need a rap remix.
He saved the night, drunk days in high times and skunk.
All right. We got alleged. We got alleged rap beat. Let's go, boys.
Go, 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 go. No games tonight. We get high like a paper cat, and you pay per view, but not pay for sight. But when I pay for her, she saved the night. Drunk days in high times and skunk jays in fried rice and punk lace with white ice. White girls and brown guys in blonde hair with brown eyes. Peroxide in white dye. I spy with my eye, it's so bright, her white light. Christian Stewart, she's Snow Whiting. Directed to cheat but no fighting. Gonna be a clash, you know Titan. Rob Patterson ain't no Mike Tyson. Take a stay from my daffodil. Jack and Jill went up the hill when they tumbled down into the ground. They never came up, they made a sound. Ain't heard from them in a while, no kidding. I bet they never wake up, start digging infected domestics and ex-girls still texting while wifeys are sexing. Next guys are impressing her buttons. Those buttons, they get jammed in. Her pussy gets slammed in. Now she brings that prime in. Oh fuck, random shit. Take a hit of this life.
Oh shit, I'm 120.19. I'm 119 now.
You can't take your pick.
And fucking counting. On the server, when it comes to fucking PvP nerds, I rank 127.
You can imagine what you want, but you can't take your vision board and while she is calling, but I'm so damn high, look, I ain't falling. It's Croydon town, so it is pouring on Sunday morning. They are scoring, light so fast, no time for morning, for the soul's gone so far away to a better place. Never really got to say goodbye, so we say goodbye today. I'm black sheep, and so stay shush. She rolling up that green bush.
I said you could rap to this fucking song. How about a different guy?
Pay for what? Girl, you better pay for this dick. See, I be about my Rari. Who's like that?
Fortune sparkling, human fortune pardonless, internally impartialist, externally a nasty. Like sting rolls, I'm screaming fuck you like CeeLo. Tripping metal instead of a dummy, it's just money while you act.
Not the one I'm looking for. What the fuck? God, this music would scare the shit out of me. Had some scary clowns. What the fuck? What the fuck is that shit? Why is this titled Trap? There's no rap. I should yell at this guy. I keep my Twitter open in case I need to yell at people. I typed in, oh shit, I'm feeling it. What is this? This might be the one. It slowed down a little bit. Throw up the bass. This is the one I was looking for. genuflect, Belinda.
Hell yeah, fuck yeah, I feel like killing it. Backyard, alright, that's like what it's like to experience.
Feeling it.
Down your throat like a keg of beer. Choke on the smoke, we in and exhale till the whole chamber is clear. Turns out so fucking weird. Try to stain this atmosphere, but they can't cause it's way too shit. How to make a hater disappear. Take shit where it ain't never been. Fuck what you thought could not comprehend this shit. If I fist to your brain with a 10, 9, 8, 7, triple 6, 5, 4, John. Criminal level, crumb, lightning storm, out of where all gang up torn. Ain't a picture big enough to fit what we dig up from the core. Got ever was militant march off this war. Taking them there, all we see is blood. Turning them out, had a drink, gotta freak that buzz. And I'm feeling it. Hell yeah, fuck yeah, I feel like killing it. Alright, that's like what it's like to experience. Because 14, you the grip of the moon and fire we spray. Cryonic on it, bullets, all those shit with toxic waves.
Whoo! What happened with the Irish?
Ain't gamers, I mean we label me all-tri clansman Nazi because I'm anti-identity like a white male founding father relatives. I've been anointed the new face of the defense of a Western civilization, mostly defending my brain from integration and defending my neck from a razor blade. Look what you done.
Holy shit.
I'm the motherfucking Sargon. Look what you done.
Oh shit.
I'm the motherfucking Sargon. Industry badges, internet friends hanging at the convention. Front row with Andy and the Chris's, waiting for a panel, buy some business. Women here to give a talk about the struggles of being girls and stuff. No one is looking to disrupt. Autism's all that we have in common.
Oh shit, I'm feeling it. What is this from?
Atomic penetration, rapid fire through your skull. Got it, no one taking it back to the days that try to lose control. Carving in a flame of fire, racing through my bubble, shit, I'm feeling it.
What song is that? What the hell is going on?
My 10-track, 32.
Is this it? Yeah, fuck off with your fucking whitelist. Did you steal that other one? Take back the north. So we say that. Take back the north. Irish. Meme. What is this?
How we going?
How you getting on?
What are we up to?
Sign just blew over. It was lying on the road there. I'm like, Jesus, put that back up because you wouldn't know where the border is, you know.
This looks like it's been dug up. Can't help but spot a big hole over here too.
I know. Let's move over here, lads. So, just try and stay off.
Craig, I'm gonna be frank with you. It's a bit suspect.
Keep it back.
I like this story.
Tell you a secret, right? We're moving the border.
Moving.
Right.
You're doing what?
Moving the.
Okay.
We're moving the border. Just a few inches every day.
Is that treason?
No, it's not treason. You put that sign outside Dublin tomorrow morning, people are going to ask questions, right? But you do it just slowly, catchy donkey. Next thing you know, you've got the 9 counties of Ulster together for United Ulster.
United Ulster?
Yeah, it's just a few inches every day, but that's 83 foot a year. Like 2035, we reckon we'll have the sleeve Russell and Cavan.
So is this like a special branch from the C-Date, or?
We're the secret territorial increasers. Secret territorial increasers.
Oh, great.
It's a good name.
That's, you know what that works out to be, though, don't you?
Read them 3 letters
The STIs,
right there.
yeah. STIs.
STIs.
Yeah, we're the STIs.
Sexually transmitted
infections.
Well, we can change the name. The name's not important anyway, is it? Secret territorial developers.
God love them, but they're not the brightest up the stairs, because tell them what they were doing.
They're actually moving the border the opposite way. They're making Northern Ireland smaller.
They didn't even notice.
And to be honest, we just keep moving the sign back. They don't seem to notice that we're moving it, and yeah, it works out for everyone.
Keep it that way. Yeah.
It for bearing responsibility. You could bloody well be sure I'm not going to bear it. But then, you know, your life is useless and meaningless. And you have
I'm not finding the memes. I'm looking hard. I'm looking hard for memes. I'm trying my best. We keep getting the same one up. The original song. It's a K production. Oh shit, I'm feeling it. Battleground over. We didn't win, did we? No, we lost. Of course we lost. Why would we ever win? We're the fucking Horde, yo. Oh god, how long is this fucking battleground been going on for? 1 hour and 29 minutes! I'm moving up the ranks. 131? Where does that put me? Yeah, I'll be maybe top 100 if I keep it up. Imagine if I actually participated in these battles instead of just jacking off the whole time. I'll let this just play out. You guys can do for what you will. Don't be stupid. I'm ready for you to distract me. That's what I thought. Bish. Fucking little bish. AFK backdoor. No, you don't fucking silence people. Disrespect. Fucking tape to your fucking skull. This guy's a fucking idiot. Hey bro, you're running into a cannon. It's a catapult. I'm so tempted to mute the microphone and just crank this shit up. Let my neighbors know what my musical preferences are. Yeah, why not? Whoa, these alliance, man. They gonna let us pass? I'm making a pass. I don't even have the fucking epic speed mount. No, you don't chase me! You leave me alone! Stop it! Stop! 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 Won't last forever. Little bitch can't 1v1 me. Doesn't matter, mate. The Storm Pike. Whoo! I don't know what the hell that guy's trying to do. I'm clicking my keys to the beat. I think I made somebody mad. I can read gutter speak. I don't even understand what the fuck he's saying. Dude, I'm gonna dispel my shit within half a second. You're not gonna get many about that. Get your curse off me. What is this? Keys and crates. Trap City. Yeah, we're not listening to Trap. Everyone got tired of Trap and they wanted some chill shit. So I strapped the GoPro on a turtle and it died.
Right here, and I'm down here with the shad to feed the fish. And
bunch of dicks.
Come on. There's another turtle. And there are a lot of turtles today. I think there's 7 or 8. Here comes GoPro Turtle. Come on, buddy. Look at him swim off with it. That's really cool.
Okay, that's stupid. That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
What's that?
Pillowcase of Terror.
Get equal. That is it. Perfect. Now I'm going to shuffle the you want. 5, 6, 7, 8.
That's dumb. That's a magic trick. Man, our Shafir looks funny. Funny looking guy.
As a boy, Josh Carpenter never truly understood the importance of God's Word.
Then everything changed during the Nuclear explosion. Somebody insult the Lord? I'm coming in hot.
I'm sending test answers and completed homework assignments to kids everywhere.
What a hero!
The truth.
Fuck you, Bible man. Boo!
What everyone thinks is right. You fail.
I mean, can't you just pass out the test answers when you're not looking? Oh, well, then banish them to the Shadow Realm.
Old saying is true.
You remember when we killed that guy? Because he wanted to help kids with their homework?
Here?
Someone's giving out free food. Bible man says you need to work for your food. No handouts.
You developed it.
And I'd be glad to install it, unless of
A
course
woman
you're
developed man Bible technology. You hear that, Cypher? A woman who made Bible man stuff?
They're not allowed to.
That's not in the Bible.
Do it exactly right. Just rising conflict.
We're on it.
Hey guys.
What? That doesn't necessarily mean it's the devil's work.
A little investigating.
That's not a fair gauge.
Take me out to the ball game.
We detected unusual levels of gamer energy. Definitely the work of devil.
Objection here.
Cypher, don't be fooled. They're in the trash can. No, don't give up the hunt.
Across town at the Empower
Oh,
Factory,
must have been the
which is
wind.
also Professor
It's like a video game NPC. Is this my first Bible Man video? No. When I was young, the original Bible Man run was like the late 90s, and when I was young, my after-school program was a really Christian spot, so they'd play a lot of Bible Man.
Isn't it, Snow White?
The OG Bible Man is much, much, much better.
Full armor of God.
Oh, baby!
Holy
Training
crap.
montage. Nope, never mind. Yeah, this is the OG crew. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, this is the OG Bible Man that looked like a sex offender in disguise. God, yeah.
Holy
Look
crap.
at the costume. It's... That's what superheroes used to look like in the golden age.
Oh my god.
Foam.
Oh.
And paper.
Oh.
And really tight spandex so you
This
can see his ball
costume.
sack. Damn, Wesley's taller than Bible Man. He's like a 10-year-old kid. Well, he's probably taller than me too, but fuck you, Bible Man. You're short too. Papa squat. No, it's not an erection. It's just the edge of the Bible. I always keep one down there.
There have been many times.
Yeah, baby. Oh, yeah. The OG intro. Fuck the new adventures of Bible Man. The new Bible Man's like the Teen Titans Go of Bible verse. Pants.
Okay.
Eating a tent with firewood. What else will they come up with? Furniture, how to make a paper airplane, woodwork and streamathon. I gotta call my dad. Manual Q&A. Boston Dynamics. Robot fights back. Now what the fuck is this shit? What is this?
Right on in.
What? Oh my god. Holy crap. Holy shit! Oh my god! Holy crap. Fuck. You can't use a chair on it? Dude! What the hell are they doing to this poor robot? Why are we whipping it? What the fuck is going on?
Tell them if they like this video to go to corridordigital.store and check out our sweet merchandise. Show them the sweater. Show them the sweater. This is brand new. The one just like it already sold out. The other side. Yeah, there we go. Tell them U.S. orders of 75.
I thought that was real. I'm gonna break top 100. Oh, I'm already got more honor than last week. Good. Again, my recommendations suck. Boston Dynamics. Every time they release a video, it's always scary. Okay, I never saw John Wick, okay? It's having trouble loading Pandora. How amazing. I'm gonna go. Oh my god, this guy is so salty. Oh my god. It's a fresh match? No, it's not. How long has this been going on for? 3 minutes? Alright, good. Amazing. Amazing. Oh, nice! I got all the bonus on it. That's what I'm here for. Come on. Very nicely done.
Hey everybody, what's going on? It's your boy, Nick. Hello, Nick to part game, you know. I think that's just how it goes. You know what I mean? They need you to go into a certain place or whatever.
Come on. Give me that blue axe. Give me the blue axe.
The heck? Please tell me you're playing on a gaming monitor. What does that even mean? What is a gaming monitor? As opposed to a monitor? What other kind of monitor is there? What? I gotta... Plays the dog now? Goofy tutorial type things I gotta do. Just give me the money, give me the guns. Let me create my own mission.
Hey guys, my name's Tomato. You need to enter 216 in the keypad in the Jefferson Memorial.
That is too much. That is too much. What does the Gundam say?
Obviously, one is a hypocrite, and two, habitually plays the victim the second the conversation's not in her favor, and immediately playing. It's empowerment long as the money goes directly to the girls they approve of. Go to your stream. This and women.
All right, but it's a form of.
Are just some bitch selling some photos. Cut the shit out, sex worker. A sex worker is a prostitute.
Ooh.
this far-left activist guy wrote a book called Alt America in which the stars have little clan heads on them. So Twitter has suspended his account, and it doesn't seem like Twitter actually wants to bring this guy back. It's kind of funny, because for the longest time, people like me, other, moderate centrists, conservatives, and like moderate liberal types, have been repeatedly saying, actually, no, I should stop there. There are even many progressives and people like Glenn Greenwald, Mike Tracy, etc., who have said, if you push for censorship, you will be censored. I can't tell you, I can only... How many times have you heard me say this? How many videos have I made about censorship backfiring on the left? Well, here we have this man, David Nywert, shocked, I tell you, that Twitter actually suspended his account. Oh, gee, from Daily Kos, which is considered, kind of fringy, but I want to read what this guy has to say. Twitter is showing that it won't even try to distinguish hate speech from the efforts to oppose it. Yes, it's quite literally always been that way. This is not new. It's been happening nonstop. And no matter how many times I wiggle my arms in the air and tell you what's going to happen, none of these people seem to learn. And they're still shocked that giant, multinational, billion-dollar corporations don't care about you. You notice that Oreo has a little pride flag? You think Oreo cares? You notice all these companies changing their little icons to pride symbols? They don't care. They're just pandering to what they view is socially acceptable. Everyone else is doing it, we better do it too. You think Twitter is going to come down? No. Let me tell you something. Advertisers, that is what Twitter, Google, whoever. The big companies want the ads. Do you think Pepsi wants their tweet to appear alongside your silly book? No. Period. And there you go. Now, I certainly think the right to free expression on these massive platforms, which have a massive control over political and public discourse, is more important than their right to generating ad revenue, and we have a serious conundrum here. They can't operate without ad revenue. They are a private business, but they're causing too much damage to the public discourse when they get rid of someone's book like this. I don't know what his book is about. I don't care what his book is about. He has a right to make the book. He has a right to show the art, and he shouldn't be suspended from Twitter because he presents his idea, period. Unfortunately, these people don't seem to understand how business works. They think that when Target changes their icon to a pride flag, that Target actually cares. And I don't want to stress, obviously many of these people see through the corporate BS that they're being pandered to. But when you stand up and say, Twitter, I demand action, get all your little journalisty friends in your weird Twitterati leftist sphere to start screaming and ranting and raving about how Twitter won't take action, advertisers see this, ad revenue goes down, and Twitter goes, I don't know, man, just ban anybody who posts anything about this. Because even though you're fighting against it, do you think the advertiser cares? Dr. Pepper doesn't care that you're the good guy. Dr. Pepper just doesn't want their ad to appear next to your silly book. So here's what we're going to do. We'll stop the rant. Let me just read what this guy has to say, and we'll go through
you're
it.
ranting.
'Cause, man, how many times have you heard me rant about this kind of stuff?
All
Before we
the
get started,
time.
go to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to
Give
support
me
my
some
work.
fucking
All of that
money.
YouTube engagement says, hey, YouTube, this video is really good. So David Nywert writes, having reached day 4 and counting of my suspension from Twitter for posting the image of clan hooded stars from the cover of my book Alt America, I can at least report one development. Yes, my life has gotten materially better without it. Now, I can agree with that. Twitter is terrible. I don't really post content anymore. I have brought this up before. I used to actually link stories. Like, mostly what I'd find interesting stories, and I would tweet like, hey, here's a story, check this out. I don't really do that anymore. Sometimes, rarely. I never tweet my own content. I just stopped. And now I just block people. You know, I've never been a big fan of blocking, but I'm just, at this point, Twitter is just so goddamn awful. I'm like, I just don't even care. Literally don't care anymore. I'm just going to tweet what I feel like tweeting, and then I ignore literally anybody who tweets at me. Just don't care. Well, let's, so Twitter is a gross hellscape. Let's read on. It's actually, my friend Luke from We Are Change said, that we were talking about it the other day, and he said, Twitter's become basically the new bum fights. And I started laughing. I was like, that's actually a really good point. If you're not familiar, bum fights was this guy who would offer like a candy bar to starving bums to make them fight each other, film it, and sell it. And it's a joke. It's meant to be like, you know, hyperbolic, facetious, whatever. But he's got a point. Twitter works because it's like people like watching the mob just tear itself apart. It's just people attacking each other. But let's read on. He said, it's true that I very much missed the stream of news that my feed provided, one I had tried to tailor to my particular needs as a journalist covering the radical right. I certainly miss the instant communication I have had with my colleagues. None of that is easy to replace. Now, I believe this man, David Nyworth, referred to Quillette as far right. So I think he did. I could be wrong. But I think that's where the guy's mind is. And Quillette is such tepid, like, centrist, intellectual, dark webby. No, not far right at all. But anyway. But the low-level stress... Let's do that. But the low-level stress of being on Twitter, dealing with adversarial conversations, contending with the ugliness that erupts whenever trolls come rolling around, is one of those things like regular driving during rush hour that you most appreciate when you stop doing it. Yeah. I get look, I've said this before, but my notifications are perma-locked at 99 plus. Like the little bell icon says 99 plus. I never click it. You tweet at me, not going to see it. Period. And Twitter likes to send me notifications randomly because I don't even understand why someone will tweet at me and it's like Twitter notifies me. I'm like, I don't care. Like, dude, it's not that I don't want to see the messages from people who are like trying to actually contact me. It's just like, why is Twitter randomly choosing which out of the 5,000 tweets in the past hour I got they're going to show me on my phone? So I don't want to turn off notifications because I get DMs and my DMs are private, and so that actually is useful for me as a tool of communication. But I just swipe. It'll be like, you know, I look at my phone, it'll have like 50 plus notifications, swipe, gone, don't care, not going to read it. And I got to tell you, man, there's a happy medium between just outright deleting Twitter, which I was really close to doing. I've deleted most of my tweets because I'm sick of the platform. But there's a happy medium between that and just like not engaging anymore. So I thought about it. I'm like, well, I got a lot of followers. People want to see what I have to say. So I'm just going to never interact for the most part. And I'm just going to tweet what I feel like tweeting when I feel like tweeting it. And then ignore everybody and their silly nonsense. You know, some people agree with me. It's not all bad, but you know what? I'm done. David says, that said, for many obvious reasons, I am working to end the suspension. But I am adamant about not removing an image that isn't hateful, but is pure political commentary. But it's a private platform. They can do whatever they want. And I'm fighting for it because the reductio ad absurdum of Twitter's reasoning for the suspension would leave not just me, but any reporter who works to monitor and expose the activities of far-right extremists, exposed to the constant threat of being banned simply for doing our mainstream jobs as journalists. Oh, you finally figured it out. How many times have journalists been suspended? Quite a few, actually. How many activists have been suspended for trying to prove that, you know, some vandalism or violence or something was coming from the far right? Quite a lot, actually. I've made several videos about this. When will you silly humans learn that your desire to censor certain images will censor you? Partially Simpsons joke right there. He says, I did hear back from Twitter. This is the statement I was given by a company spokesperson. We don't allow hateful symbols in avatars or header images in order to protect users from unintentionally being exposed to abusive imagery that can be upsetting. We know that some people may use these symbols to confront a hateful ideology, but that's not always obvious at first glance. In this case, additional context in the account profile clarifies the intent, but that isn't always visible in the product. So, for example, someone viewing the header on mobile wouldn't have the extra context and would only see the hateful image. They don't care, quite literally, are telling you context is irrelevant. Please, David, and everyone who wants to fight the far right, understand this. They will come for you first. I'm just shouting at brick walls, though. It's like you know, just shouting at a wall, and the wall's like, but you're a bigot. That's all. Someone spray painted on a brick wall. You're a bigot, and no matter how many times you try and say to them, they're going to censor you. That's the only thing you see. Look at this book. This book could be pro far right. How is anyone supposed to know it's critical or trying to expose them? It quite literally could be pro propaganda for them. So do you think context matters? I do. And I actually, outside of context, this shouldn't be banned. Twitter is a platform where people engage in political conversations. Twitter don't care. Twitter wants ad dollars. Advertisers don't want to be next to your silly book. The problem with this rationale are twofold. First, it accepts at face value that the image in my profile is hateful. It is, and treats context as meaningless. Oh, this is hilarious. I seem to recall many people referring to Count Dankula as a bigot and saying context didn't matter. Here we are. We've come full circle. Congratulations on finally realizing that the push for authoritarianism that you, and there's actually a controversy involving Trump and the First Amendment right now, but I'll get to that later, maybe for another video, that when you say, I want Big Daddy to censor my opponents, he goes, you know what, you're both annoying me, swat, and gets rid of both of you. You know what Twitter wants? Twitter wants people to talk about Friends. Twitter wants people to talk about the latest, the season finale of Game of Thrones. Twitter wants you to talk about Chernobyl. Twitter doesn't want you to post your book, which shows a bunch of Klan hoods, because that is bad for their bottom line. Congratulations. Your activism will be silenced, and I assure you, the actual far right will take off the hoods, put them in their storage locker, and put on some other type of hat, and they'll change the meaning of whatever they need to say. They'll change the word, and they'll change their symbols, and they'll hide it all with dog whistles. Now, of course, I understand the left sees dog whistles everywhere, but I gotta say, there's a bit of catharsis in reading an article like this, where it's like, me, you, everybody who's been watching my videos, we've been sitting here saying like, oh no, look what they're doing. These people have lost their minds. And now we're sitting back kind of like smoking a cigar like, yep, who could have seen that coming? So, I don't know, whatever. Let's see how he concludes this so I don't have to ramble for another 20 minutes about the same thing I talk about every other week. He says, I will admit there's a lot about Twitter I miss. I especially miss its didactic qualities resulting from the 280 character limit, because it's been fascinating to see how readily people can absorb information when it's delivered in bite-sized chunks. It's actually a really bad thing in my opinion. Excuse me. And not being able to connect with my fellow journalists is, frankly, something of a professional debacle. So I will continue to discuss this with folks at Twitter and report back to you on how it's going. Hopefully at some point my account will be restored. In the meantime, did I mention how nice and productive life is when you're off Twitter? Well, here, David, I completely agree with you on that one. I have been spending less time on Twitter. Admittedly, all day, every day I'm reading news, so Twitter is there. But, look, this is just another individual who doesn't understand they're like first in the chopping block, okay? When you want to expose someone, you need to have proof. Your proof is hateful. You will be banned. And the people you're trying to ban will put on a nice suit and say, I don't know what you're talking about. And then you'll never be able to prove it. Let me give you one more anecdote before I go, because I've told the story before. I was in the UK, and I was arguing with someone about a particular individual who is considered to be a racist, and I said that they on YouTube had used some slurs. This individual said, that's not true, you're lying. And I said, what? No, I'm not. Like, this person on YouTube made these slurs. Like, what are you talking about? And they said, BS. I've never seen that. Prove it. And I said, okay. I pulled up my phone, searched on Google, so-and-so says X, couldn't find anything. It was really weird. Because, the week prior, 2 weeks prior, in the US, I had seen the story. Activists were sharing it, saying, aha, we've caught this guy. So I'm here in the UK, and I'm not saying this is the exact reason why I couldn't find it. I don't know why I couldn't find it. But I'll tell you this. On the Google search page, there was nothing. At the bottom, it said, we have removed certain things for being offensive, yada, yada, yada. And I thought to myself, again, I can't prove that the article in question was removed. I couldn't find it. But when I saw that message, I said, well, there you go. They are cleansing the worst of the worst. They are hiding Listen, when someone on the far left says something extremely, violent or calls for milkshaking, that's not, it should be bannable, but for some reason they don't ban it. We see that, and we say, you're nuts. Then when you get someone on the fringe far right, or whatever you want to call it, saying some extremist nonsense, Twitter bans it. We don't want that on our platform, and they clean it up. So as I've described it before, the right is being made to look prim and proper, and the left is being made to look like psychopaths. Censorship is backfiring on the left, and they are shocked when it happens to them, because you know what? They're so entrenched in their insane tribalism that when someone here's really annoying. I've been on the left my whole life. I am still moderate center left. I'm actively Andrew Yang. I love that dude. That dude's great. He's not perfect, but he's a really good dude, and I'm rooting for him, and I'm looking forward to the debates. They don't care. They don't care that someone who is a lifelong I was a far left anarchist when I was younger, going to these protests and everything, wearing black t-shirts, black jeans, skating, hanging out with other punks, and they don't care what my perspective is. They don't care that I'm right. All they know is the tribe said X, and you do what the tribe says. But now that they're being slammed in the face every single day by it, they're starting to wake up. And I've been standing here the whole time like guys, and they've been yelling at me, telling me off, insulting me. So you know what? I will still defend your speech. I will still stand by this man and say your book should absolutely be allowed on Twitter. Twitter should reinstate your profile immediately. No questions asked. We know what your intent was. We know what the context is. You are allowed to your opinion, and your opinion is important for public discourse. I want everyone to see your book. I want them to see your perspective. In fact, I would recommend people buy the book and read it. It's important to know what people you disagree with think. Knowledge is power. If you can better understand the perspective of David Nywert, perhaps we can actually come to an understanding to solve problems in this country. But what's happening is people are being pushed aside. They're being divided. Censorship doesn't work. And people are not being exposed to new ideas. You don't have to agree with them, by no means, but I do recommend you try and research and understand those you do disagree with. Perhaps many of you do agree with him, and you do like his book. Well, then you should stand in agreement with me that we should make sure Twitter doesn't have the arbitrary power to silence dissidents and researchers and journalists and activists, and that all of this is important for public discourse.